The wedding guests gasped in horror as Clara Wade stepped into the candlelit church, her transformation so complete that grown men dropped their whiskey glasses and women clutched their pearls. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to when the entire town of Cedar Ridge thought Elias Boone had lost his mind for proposing to the ugliest spinster in Wyoming territory. Stay with me until the end of this tale and comment below which town you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story has traveled. The autumn wind howled through Cedar Ridge like a harbinger of scandal that October morning in 1876. Elias Boone, the man they called Grizzly for the claw marks that ran from his left temple to his jaw, stood at the entrance of Wade's tailoring shop, his massive frame blocking out the morning sun. His weathered hands, scarred from years of trapping in the Rockies, trembled slightly as he pushed open the door. Inside, Clara Wade looked up from her sewing, squinting through thick spectacles that magnified her already prominent eyes. At 32, she had long accepted her fate as the town spinster. Her face marked by childhood smallpox scars, her crooked nose from a fall in her youth, and her mousy brown hair that refused to hold a curl had earned her cruel nicknames whispered behind hands at church socials. "Mr. Boone," she said, her voice steady despite her surprise. The mountain man rarely came to town, and when he did, he certainly never visited her shop. "How can I help you?" Elias removed his beaver fur hat, revealing hair as wild as the mountains he called home. "Miss Wade," he began, his deep voice rougher than usual. "I've come to ask you something." Clara set down her needle, waiting. She'd learned patience in her years of solitude, years of watching other women marry while she mended their wedding dresses. "I need a wife," Elias said bluntly, "and I'm asking you." The words hung in the air like smoke from a poorly tended fire. Clara's hands froze mid-reach for her thread. Through the shop window she could see Mrs. Prudence Baker and her daughter Isabel walking past. They peered in their faces, twisting with curiosity. "Mr. Boone," Clara finally managed, "surely you're mistaken. There are many younger, prettier women in Cedar Ridge who would—" "I don't want them," Elias interrupted, taking a step closer. His presence filled the small shop, bringing with him the scent of pine and leather. "I want you." Before Clara could respond, the shop door burst open. Prudence Baker stood there, her face flushed with the excitement of fresh gossip. "Clara Wade," she exclaimed, her eyes darting between the two. "What business does Mr. Boone have in your establishment?" "Mrs. Baker," Elias said, turning his scarred face toward her. The woman instinctively stepped back. "I've just proposed marriage to Miss Wade." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Prudence Baker laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that cut through the air like a blade. "Marriage to Clara." She clutched her chest dramatically. "Oh, Mr. Boone, what cruel joke is this?" "No joke," Elias said firmly. "I'm dead serious." Prudence's laughter died, replaced by bewilderment. She looked at Clara's stunned face, then back at Elias. But she's... She gestured vaguely at Clara, unable to find words polite enough to speak aloud. "She's what?" Elias challenged, his gray eyes hardening like winter ice. "Well, I mean, no offense, but Clara is... She's not exactly..." Prudence fumbled her daughter Isabel, peering over her shoulder with wide eyes. "She's the finest seamstress in 3 counties, Elias said. She tends to the sick without asking for payment. She reads more books than anyone else in this town, and she doesn't waste her time on foolish gossip." His last words were pointed, and Prudence flushed. Clara found her voice. "Mr. Boone, I appreciate your kindness, but surely you understand that people will talk. They'll say terrible things about you, about your judgment." "Let them talk," Elias said, turning back to her. "I've lived in those mountains for 15 years, Miss Wade. I've fought grizzlies, survived blizzards that would freeze a man's soul, and tracked through territories where no white man's ever set foot. You think I care what a bunch of town gossips say?" Prudence huffed indignantly and stormed out, Isabel trailing behind her. Within minutes, Clara knew the entire town would hear about this. "Why me?" Clara asked quietly, once they were alone again. Elias moved closer to the counter. In the morning light filtering through the window, Clara could see the deep lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark beard. 2 months ago," he said. I was watching from the ridge when those Carter boys were tormenting that lame dog behind the general store. You came out and chased them off with a broom. Then you spent an hour tending to that dog's wounds." Claire remembered the incident, but was surprised anyone had witnessed it. "Last winter, Elias continued, when the Morrison family was down with fever, you nursed them for 3 weeks, never asked for a penny. And when young Tommy Morrison recovered, you taught him to read using your own books." "You've been watching me?" Clara asked, not sure whether to be flattered or alarmed. "I come to town more than people think," Elias admitted. "I just don't make a show of it. And every time I come, I see you, working, helping, never complaining about your lot, never bitter about how folks treat you." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. No one had ever seen her this way, noticed these things about her. "But Mr. Boone Elias," she said, testing his name, I'm not a beautiful woman. I'm not young. I can't give you a house full of children or turn heads when we walk down the street." Elias reached across the counter and gently took her hand. His palm was rough, calloused, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. "Miss Wade, I've lived alone in those mountains for so long I'd forgotten what it meant to be human. Beauty fades, youth disappears, but strength, character, the ability to see good in a world that's shown you little kindness, that's rare. That's what I need." Before Clara could respond, the shop door chimed again. This time it was Sheriff Tom Bradley, followed by Mayor Cornelius Hammond and Reverend Paul Mitchell. News traveled fast in Cedar Ridge. "Boone," the sheriff said, his hand resting casually on his pistol. "Heard you're causing quite a stir." "Just proposing to a lady, Tom," Elias replied calmly. Mayor Hammond, a portly man who prided himself on maintaining order in Cedar Ridge, stepped forward. "Now, Mr. Boone, surely we can discuss this rationally. Miss Wade is a respectable woman, and we wouldn't want her reputation damaged by any misunderstanding." "What misunderstanding?" Elias asked. "I've asked her to marry me, plain and simple." Reverend Mitchell, young and earnest, cleared his throat. "Mr. Boone, marriage is a sacred institution. It shouldn't be entered into lightly or as some form of transaction." Clara felt her cheeks burn. They all assumed Elias must have ulterior motives, that no one could genuinely want her for herself. "Reverend," she said, finding strength in her indignation, "are you suggesting Mr. Boone isn't sincere?" The Reverend looked uncomfortable. "Well, I just mean, that is to say," "You mean," Clara said, standing straighter, "that someone like him couldn't possibly want someone like me without some hidden reason." The men exchanged glances. Mayor Hammond coughed. "Miss Wade, we're only thinking of your welfare. Mr. Boone lives like a savage in those mountains. What kind of life would that be for a respectable woman?" "A honest one," Elias said. "I've got a solid cabin money saved from 15 years of trapping and plans to expand. I'm offering Miss Wade a real home, not just 4 walls and a roof." Sheriff Bradley stepped closer to Elias. "And what happens when winter comes? When you're snowed in for months, Miss Wade isn't used to that kind of hardship." "You don't know what I'm used to," Clara said quietly, but with steel in her voice. "You see me every day, but none of you really know me. You know my face, my circumstances, but not my strength." The shop fell silent. Through the window, Clara could see a crowd gathering. Mrs. Baker had done her work well, faces pressed against the glass, eager for spectacle. "I need time to think," Clara said finally. "Mr. Boone, I appreciate your offer. Give me 3 days." Elias nodded. 3 days. He looked at the assembled men. "And I'll be staying in town until I get my answer. Tom, I trust there won't be any trouble." The sheriff shook his head. "Not from the law. Can't speak for the gossips, though." As Elias left, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Clara heard the whispers starting immediately. "Lost his mind, so must be touched in the head. Poor Clara being made a fool of." That evening, Clara sat in her small room above the shop, looking at herself in the cracked mirror. She traced the scars on her cheeks, adjusted her thick spectacles, tried to smooth her unruly hair. What did Elias Boone see that no one else did? A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It was her only friend, Mary Chen, the Chinese laundress's daughter, who, like Clara, existed on the margins of Cedar Ridge society. "Clara," Mary said, entering with a pot of tea. The whole town is talking. I know, Clara sighed, accepting the cup gratefully. They're saying horrible things, Mary continued, that he must be addled or drunk or playing some cruel game. Maybe he is, Clara said, though she didn't believe it. Something in Elias's eyes had been genuine raw even. Mary studied her friend. You're considering it. Is that foolish? In this town, everything we do is considered foolish, Mary said with a bitter smile. But Clara, this could be your chance, your escape. To what, a harder life in the mountains? To a life where someone sees you, Mary said softly. Really sees you? The next morning, Clara opened her shop to find a line of women waiting, all eager to share their opinions. Mrs. Hammond, the mayor's wife, sailed in first, her bustle rustling importantly. Clara, dear, she said with false sweetness, we're all concerned about you. This mountain man, he's obviously disturbed. We think it best if you refuse him gently and let the sheriff escort him out of town. Why would the sheriff need to do that? Clara asked, continuing her sewing. Well, when you refuse him, he might become violent. You know how these mountain men are more beast than human. Clara's needle paused. Mr. Boone has never shown any signs of violence toward anyone who didn't deserve it. But the way he lives, exclaimed Mrs. Patterson, the banker's wife. Like an animal in those mountains. No proper home, no civilization. He has a cabin, Clara interrupted, with walls and a roof and a floor, which is more than some families in this town have. The women exchanged glances. Mrs. Baker pushed forward. Clara, we're trying to protect you. When he realizes what he's done proposing to you in some fit of madness, he'll abandon you. And then where will you be? Your reputation will be ruined entirely. My reputation? Clara laughed a bitter sound she rarely allowed herself. What reputation? I'm already the town spinster, the ugly seamstress the woman children point at and whisper about. What exactly do I have to lose? The shop fell silent. Mrs. Hammond's face reddened. Well, I never— No, Clara said, standing. You never. None of you ever. You've never looked at me as anything more than an object of pity or ridicule. You come here for your dresses because I'm skilled and cheap, but you've never once invited me to your homes for tea, never included me in your social circles, never treated me as anything more than a servant with a needle. The women began backing toward the door, shocked by Clara's outburst. She'd always been so quiet, so accepting of her place. And now, Clara continued, her voice rising, when someone finally sees value in me, you can't stand it. It disrupts your understanding of the world, doesn't it? That someone like Elias Boone might choose me not despite what I am, but because of it. Mrs. Baker was the last to leave, pausing at the door. You'll regret this, Clara Wade. When you're freezing in some mountain shack ruined and abandoned, remember we tried to warn you. After they left, Clara's hand shook as she tried to return to her sewing. The confrontation had taken more out of her than she'd expected. She'd never stood up to them before, never voiced the hurt that had accumulated over years of subtle and not-so-subtle slights. That afternoon, she had an unexpected visitor, old Samuel Morrison, Tommy's grandfather. The elderly man removed his hat respectfully as he entered. Miss Wade, he said, I wanted to thank you again for what you did for my family last winter. It was nothing, Mr. Morrison. It was everything, he interrupted. We would have died without your care. And I want you to know something about Elias Boone. Clara looked up surprised. 15 years ago, when he first came to these mountains, he was running from something terrible, Samuel said. I don't know what he never said, but I've done business with him over the years buying his furs, and I've never met a more honest man. People say he's dangerous, Clara said carefully. He is, Samuel agreed, to those who threaten what he protects. But I've seen him gentle a spooked horse, with just his voice seen him carry an injured fox cub 5 miles to someone who could help it. The scars on his face got those protecting a Shoshone family from a grizzly. The Indians still tell that story. Clara felt something shift in her chest. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know the truth about the man who's offered for you, Samuel said. This town, it's never been kind to those who don't fit its narrow ideas of proper. Maybe it's time someone broke free of that. That evening, Clara walked to the boarding house where Elias was staying. The streets were unusually quiet. People watched from windows but didn't approach. She found him on the porch, whittling a piece of wood. "Miss Wade," he said, standing quickly, "is everything all right?" "May we talk?" she asked. He led her to a bench overlooking the valley. The setting sun painted the mountains gold and crimson, and Clara understood for the first time the beauty that had called to him. "They're all trying to talk me out of it," she said. "I figured they would. They say you're dangerous." "I can be." "They say I'll be miserable in the mountains." "You might be at first." Clara appreciated his honesty. "Tell me about your life up there." Elias set down his whittling. "I wake with the sun, check my trap lines, hunt when I need to. I've got a vegetable garden, small, but it produces. I read by the fire at night, got a whole shelf of books I've collected over the years. Winters are hard. I won't lie, but there's a beauty in the silence in the snow. And spring. Spring in the mountains is like watching the world be born again." "It sounds lonely," Clara said. "It is," he admitted. "That's why I'm here." "But why me?" she pressed. "Really, truly, why me?" Elias turned to face her fully. In the dying light, his scars seemed less prominent, his gray eyes more gentle. "You want the truth? Fine. I'm 43 years old, Miss Wade. I've lived alone so long I'd almost forgotten how to speak to another person. I came to town last Christmas planning to drink myself stupid at the saloon. Instead, I saw you through the church window playing the organ for midnight service. Everyone else had family with them. You were alone, but you played like you were performing for angels." Clara remembered that night she'd thought the church was empty. "I started coming to town more often," Elias continued, "never announcing myself, just watching, and I saw how you treated everyone with kindness, even those who mocked you. I saw you give your lunch to that vagrant behind the hotel. I saw you teaching the Mexican children to read when their parents couldn't afford school, and I realized something." "What?" "You're like me," he said simply. "You're on the outside looking in, but unlike me, you didn't let it make you bitter. You didn't run to the mountains to hide. You stayed and faced it every day. That takes a courage I don't have." Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm not brave. I'm just stuck." "No," Elias said firmly. "You're choosing to see good in a place that's shown you little. That's not stuck, that's strength. And I need that strength in my life. I'm not asking you to save me, Miss Wade. I'm asking you to share a life with someone who sees your worth." They sat in silence as the stars began to appear. Finally, Clara spoke. "I need my third day, but I'm leaning toward yes." Elias smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, making him almost handsome despite the scars. The next day brought a new wave of interference. Reverend Mitchell visited the shop, Bible in hand. "Miss Wade," he began formally, "I've come to discuss the sanctity of marriage." "I'm familiar with it, Reverend," Clara said, not looking up from her work. "Marriage should be based on mutual affection, shared values, and proper compatibility. And you don't think Mr. Boone and I are compatible?" The Reverend shifted uncomfortably. "Well, you're from very different worlds." "We're both outcasts," Clara said bluntly. "That seems like a significant shared experience. But the physical hardships of mountain life—" "Reverend," Clara interrupted, "have you ever considered that the emotional hardships of town life might be worse? At least in the mountains, I won't have to pretend not to hear the whispers, won't have to smile when people's children point at me, won't have to accept charity work from women who pity me." The Reverend had no answer for that. Later, Sheriff Bradley stopped by. "Clara, I need to ask, is Boone pressuring you in any way, threatening you?" "No, Sheriff. The only pressure I'm feeling is from everyone trying to talk me out of it." Bradley sighed. "I had to ask. But Clara, life up there won't be easy." "Life down here isn't easy either," she replied. "It's just a different kind of hard." That evening, Clara made a decision that shocked even herself. She walked into the saloon. The piano stopped playing. Every man in the place turned to stare. Respectable women didn't enter saloons, especially not spinster seamstresses. Elias was at a corner table nursing a whiskey. He stood immediately when he saw her. "Miss Wade, I have an answer," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "But first I have questions. Ask them. If I marry you, will I be your partner or your possession?" "Partner," he said without hesitation. "Will I have say and decisions about our life? Equal say. If I'm unhappy, truly unhappy, after giving it an honest try, will you let me leave?" Elias paused, then nodded. "I'd never keep you against your will." Clara took a deep breath. The entire saloon was holding its breath with her. "Then yes, Mr. Boone, I'll marry you." The silence that followed was deafening. Then someone Clara couldn't see who started laughing. Soon the whole saloon erupted in laughter and jeers. "The Beast and the Spinster, match made in hell. $10 says she's dead within a month." Elias moved toward the mockers, his face darkening, but Clara caught his arm. "No," she said firmly. "They're not worth it." She turned to face the room. "Laugh all you want. At least I'll be with someone who sees me as more than a joke." As they left the saloon together, Clara heard the bets being placed on how long the marriage would last. The kindest gave it 3 months. The next morning, Clara found a package on her doorstep. Inside was a beautifully carved wooden rose so detailed she could see the veins in each petal. A note in Elias's rough handwriting read, "Real roses die. This one won't. Like my regard for you." Mary Chen helped her pack her few belongings. "You're really doing this." "I am." "The whole town thinks you've both gone mad." "Maybe we have," Clara said. "But at least it's our madness, not theirs." The wedding was set for the following Saturday. Clara expected a nearly empty church who would come to see the town spinster marry the mountain savage, but she underestimated the draw of spectacle. The church was packed, every pew filled with faces eager to witness what they assumed would be a disaster. Clara could hear the whispers as she waited in the vestry. "She's so desperate she'll marry anything. He must be touched in the head. What kind of wedding night will that be?" Clara's hands shook as she smoothed her simple dress. She'd made it herself, of course. It wasn't white, she was too old and practical for that, but a deep blue that she'd always thought brought out what little was good in her coloring. Mary stood beside her as her only bridesmaid. "You don't have to do this," she said gently. "Even now you could run." "No," Clara said firmly. "I've spent my whole life running from their judgment, hiding behind my sewing and my books. Today, I face them." The organ began to play Mrs. Patterson at the keys, playing with obvious reluctance. Clara took a breath and stepped out. The walk down the aisle felt eternal. She saw every smirk, every eye roll, every elbow nudge. But at the altar, Elias stood waiting. He'd tried to tame his hair, trimmed his beard, and wore what was probably the only suit he'd ever owned. When their eyes met, he smiled that transformative smile, and suddenly the crowd didn't matter. Reverend Mitchell performed the ceremony with obvious discomfort, rushing through the vows as if afraid God might strike them all down for participating in such a farce. "Do you, Elias Boone, take Clara Wade to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was strong, certain. "Do you, Clara Wade, take Elias Boone to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara looked out at the congregation. She saw Prudence Baker whispering behind her fan. Mayor Hammond shaking his head. Young Isabel Baker stifling giggles. Then she looked at Elias, waiting patiently, seeing her. "I do." "Then I pronounce you man and wife." Elias stepped forward and kissed her gently, respectfully. It was Clara's first kiss at 32 years old, and even in its brevity, it was sweeter than she'd imagined. As they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, Clara expected the laughter to resume. Instead, there was a strange silence. Something in the way Elias looked at her, the way he offered her his arm, the dignity with which they walked back down the aisle. It wasn't what the crowd had expected. Outside the church, the townspeople gathered, still not quite believing what they'd witnessed. Mrs. Hammond approached, her face pinched with disapproval. "Well, Clara, I hope you're satisfied. You've made yourself the laughingstock of Cedar Ridge." "Better to be a laughingstock with someone who values me," Clara replied calmly, "than a respected woman who's alone." The wedding feast, if it could be called that, was held at the boarding house. Only a handful attended old Samuel Morrison and his family. Mary Chen and her parents, and surprisingly Doc Whitman, the town physician who'd always treated Clara kindly. "Don't know why everyone's so shocked," Doc Whitman said, raising his glass. "In my experience, the best marriages are between people who see each other clearly, not through some romantic haze. To the bride and groom, may you prove them all wrong." As evening fell, Elias helped Clara onto his wagon. Her few possessions were already loaded, some clothes, her precious books, her sewing supplies. The crowd had gathered again to watch them leave, calling out final mockeries. "Don't forget to write if you survive. We'll save a burial plot for you, Clara." But as the wagon rolled out of town, Clara didn't look back. She kept her eyes on the mountains ahead, dark and mysterious against the star-filled sky. "Are you afraid?" Elias asked as they left the last buildings behind. "Terrified," Clara admitted. "Of the mountains." "No. Of disappointing you. Of you realizing they were right about me." Elias stopped the wagon. In the moonlight, his scarred face was serious. "Clara, may I call you Clara now?" She nodded. "Clara, I've lived with grizzlies and wolves, I've survived blizzards and floods, but nothing terrifies me more than the thought that I might disappoint you, that you'll realize you've traded one prison for another." "Then we're both afraid of the same thing," Clara said. "Good," Elias said, starting the wagon again. "Shared fear is better than lonely confidence." The journey to his cabin took most of the night. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the air grew thin and cold. Clara pulled her shawl tighter, and without a word, Elias handed her his coat. "You'll freeze," she protested. "I'm used to it. You're not. Not yet." As dawn broke, they reached a clearing. There, nestled among towering pines, stood a cabin. It was larger than Clara had expected, built solid and strong, with a stone chimney already sending up smoke. Elias had hired someone to prepare it for their arrival. "It's not much," Elias said nervously, "but it's warm and dry and—" "It's perfect," Clara interrupted. And she meant it. No mockery here, no whispers, no pitying looks, just silence and possibility. Elias helped her down from the wagon, and for a moment they stood awkwardly at the threshold. The wedding night loomed between them, unspoken but present. "Clara," Elias said carefully, "I want you to know I expect nothing tonight, or any night until you're ready. You have your own room if you want it. This marriage can be whatever we make it." Clara felt a rush of gratitude and something else, a warmth she'd never expected to feel. "Thank you," she said simply. Inside the cabin was clean and sparse, but comfortable. A main room with a large fireplace, a kitchen area, 2 bedrooms, and surprisingly shelves already built along one wall. "For your books," Elias explained, seeing her notice them. Clara's eyes filled with tears. In all her years in Cedar Ridge, no one had ever made space for her books. That first night, they sat by the fire, awkward but trying. Elias whittled while Clara read aloud from one of her books. Dickens' A Story About Outcasts and Redemption. When she finally retired to her own room, she heard Elias banking the fire, checking the locks, making the cabin secure. She fell asleep, feeling something she'd never felt before, protected. The next morning brought the reality of mountain life. Elias rose before dawn to check his trap lines, leaving Clara to explore her new home. She found his books a surprising collection of classics and practical guides. She organized the kitchen, started a stew with the supplies he'd stocked. And when he returned at midday, weary and successful with 2 rabbits, she had hot coffee waiting. "You don't have to cook for me," he said, surprised. "Partners, remember, we both contribute." Days turned into a week, then 2. They developed a rhythm, Elias teaching her about mountain survival, Clara bringing order and comfort to the Spartan cabin. She learned to skin rabbits, identify edible plants, read weather signs. He learned to accept help, to share his space, to talk about more than just survival. But it was the evenings Clara treasured most. By the fire, with no one to perform for or hide from, they talked. Really talked. Elias told her about his past, a failed marriage to a woman who'd left him for someone smoother, handsomer, less scarred inside and out. Clara shared her own pain, years of rejection, of being told she was worthless, of watching life pass her by through her shop window. 3 weeks into their marriage, the first test came. A early winter storm, fierce and sudden. Elias was out checking traps when it hit. Clara waited, watching the snow pile higher, the wind howling like a living thing. Night fell. No Elias. The old Clara would have waited paralyzed by fear and indecision, but mountain life had already begun to change her. She bundled up in every piece of warm clothing she could find, tied a rope around her waist and the other end to the porch post, and ventured out into the storm. She found him a quarter-mile from the cabin, his leg caught in a trap that had snapped wrong, nearly unconscious from cold and pain. How she got him back to the cabin, she never quite remembered. Pure determination, perhaps, or the strength that comes from finally having something worth fighting for. She tended his wound with the medical supplies she'd wisely brought from town, kept him warm, forced broth between his blue lips. When he finally came fully conscious, his first word was her name. Clara. I'm here. You came for me. Partners remember. His hand found hers, rough and cold, but alive. They were all wrong about you. About us, she corrected. That night, for the first time, Clara didn't retire to her separate room. She stayed by Elias's bed, holding his hand, watching him breathe. When he woke in the small hours, fevered and disoriented, she was there with cool cloths and gentle words. By morning, his fever had broken. You saved my life, he said wonderingly. You saved mine first, Clara replied. Just in a different way. As Elias recovered, something shifted between them. The careful distance they'd maintained dissolved. Small touches became common, his hand on her shoulder as he passed her fingers brushing his as she handed him coffee. One evening, as Clara read aloud, Elias moved from his separate chair to sit beside her on the small sofa he'd built. Is this all right? He asked. More than all right, she said, leaning slightly into his warmth. That night, she kissed him. Not the brief ceremonial kiss of their wedding, but a real kiss full of growing affection and desire. When they pulled apart, Elias's eyes were wide with wonder. Clara, you don't have to. I want to, she said firmly. If you do. God, yes. Their physical relationship developed slowly, carefully, with a tenderness that would have shocked the gossipers of Cedar Ridge. Elias treated her like precious glass at first, until Clara laughingly reminded him she'd hauled him through a blizzard. I'm stronger than I look, she said. You're stronger than anyone I've known, he replied, and meant it. Winter deepened, and with it their bond. They were snowed in for weeks at a time, but instead of the misery the townspeople had predicted, Clara found peace. No one to judge her appearance, no mirrors, except the small shaving glass Elias used. She stopped wearing her thick spectacles, except for close work, stopped trying to tame her wild hair, stopped hunching her shoulders to appear smaller. One morning, Elias watched her making breakfast, humming softly, moving with new confidence, and said, You're beautiful. Clara laughed. The isolation has affected your eyesight. No, he said seriously. I mean it. The way you move now without fear, the way you smile without covering your mouth, the way you look at me like I'm worth looking at. You're beautiful, Clara. She stopped pancake batter dripping from her spoon. No one had ever called her beautiful before, not even as a child. You really see me that way. I've always seen you that way. Now you're starting to see it too. Spring came late to the mountains, but when it arrived, it was glorious. The meadow around their cabin exploded with wildflowers, and Elias taught Clara to fish in the stream that ran nearby. She was terrible at it, but laughed at her failures in a way she never could have in town. One day, as they worked together in the vegetable garden they were planting, Clara said, We should go to town for supplies soon. Elias looked up concerned. Are you ready for that? I think so. Are you? I'd face down 100 Prudence Bakers for you. Clara laughed. One is quite enough. They made the trip on a beautiful May morning, almost 6 months after their wedding. Clara wore a new dress she'd made simple but well-fitted in a green that brought out the color in her eyes. Her hair, grown longer, was braided simply. The mountain sun had given her skin a healthy glow, and the physical work had strengthened her body. But the biggest change was in how she carried herself. Gone was the hunched, apologetic posture. She sat straight beside Elias on the wagon seat, meeting the eyes of everyone they passed. The first person they encountered was young Tommy Morrison, now 13. His eyes widened when he saw Clara. Miss Wade, I mean, Mrs. Boone, you look different. Do I? Clara asked with a smile. You look happy, the boy said wonderingly. At the general store, conversation stopped when they entered. Mrs. Patterson actually dropped a jar of preserves. The crash echoed in the sudden silence. Clara, Prudence Baker gasped. Is that really you? Hello, Prudence, Clara said calmly. We've come for supplies. The store erupted in whispers. Clara ignored them moving through the aisles with Elias selecting what they needed, but she could hear the fragments. She looked so different, almost pretty. Must be the mountain air. Look how he watches her. At the counter, Mr. Henley, the store owner, stammered, You're looking well, Mrs. Boone. Mountain life agrees with me, Clara said simply. As they loaded their supplies, Doc Whitman approached. Clara, Elias, good to see you both. He studied Clara with his physician's eye. You look healthier than I've ever seen you. I feel healthier, Clara admitted, and happier, much. The doctor smiled. Then the prescription worked perfectly. As they prepared to leave, a crowd had gathered. Some of the same people who'd mocked them at their wedding stood staring, trying to reconcile this confident, glowing woman with the spinster they'd ridiculed. Mrs. Hammond, never one to be silenced for long, approached. Clara, we've all been so worried about you. Alone up there in those mountains with... She glanced at Elias nervously. With my husband, Clara finished, who treats me with more kindness and respect than this entire town ever did. The mayor's wife flushed. Now, Clara, that's hardly fair. Isn't it? Clara asked. Tell me, Mrs. Hammond, in all my years in Cedar Ridge, how many times was I invited to your home? How many times did any of you include me in anything beyond paying me to sew your dresses? Silence. That's what I thought, Clara said. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a home to return to, a real home where I'm valued for more than my needle. As they drove away, Clara heard Isabel Baker say to her mother, She's pretty now. How did she get pretty? And Prudence Baker's response, She's not pretty, dear, she's just different. But young Tommy Morrison, wise beyond his years, said what the adults couldn't, She's not different, she's just finally being seen. The ride home was quiet until they were well out of town. Then Elias said, You were magnificent. I was honest. Same thing in my book. That night, as they lay in bed, their bed now shared for months, Clara said they couldn't understand it. Understand what? How someone like you could want someone like me. Even now, when they see me happy, they can't understand it. Elias pulled her closer. That's because they never saw who you really were. They saw what they expected to see, a spinster, a victim, someone to pity. I saw a survivor, a woman of strength and kindness, someone who gave even when she had little to give. And I saw a man, not a beast, Clara said softly. A man who'd been hurt, but hadn't let it make him cruel. A man who saw beauty where others saw only flaws. The summer that followed brought unexpected challenges that would test their newfound happiness in ways neither had anticipated. It started with a letter delivered by a traveling fur trader who stopped at their cabin in early July. Mrs. Boone, the trader asked, eyeing Clara with the curiosity of someone who'd heard the stories but couldn't quite reconcile them with the confident woman before him. Yes. Clara took the letter, recognizing the elaborate script immediately. Her sister Margaret, whom she hadn't heard from in 5 years. After the trader left, Clara stared at the unopened letter for hours. Elias found her that evening, still holding it, sitting on the porch as the sun set behind the mountains. Bad news, he asked, gently settling beside her. I don't know. It's from my sister, Margaret. She lives in Denver now, married well. A banker. Clara turned the letter over in her hands. She wrote me off years ago when it became clear I'd never marry, never stop being an embarrassment to the family name. You don't have to read it, Elias said. We can burn it right now if you want. Clara smiled at him gratefully but shook her head. No, I should know what she wants. She broke the seal and read aloud, Dearest Clara, I have heard the most disturbing news about your recent marriage to some mountain savage. Surely these rumors cannot be true. No sister of mine would degrade herself so thoroughly. I am traveling to Cedar Ridge next month with my husband for business. If these reports are accurate, I demand you meet with me so we can discuss having this unfortunate union annulled. You may yet salvage some dignity if you act quickly. Your concerned sister Margaret. Clara's hands trembled as she lowered the letter. The old shame, the familiar sting of family rejection crashed over her like a wave. Savage am I, Elias said with dark humor, though Clara could see the hurt in his eyes. She doesn't know you, Clara said fiercely. She doesn't know us. Will you meet with her? Clara stood abruptly, walked to the fire pit they used for outdoor cooking, and dropped the letter into the flames. No, my family is here now. Margaret made her choice years ago when she told me I was better off hidden away where I couldn't embarrass anyone. But the letter had shaken something loose in Clara memories of all the ways she'd been found wanting by those who should have loved her most. That night she woke from nightmares of being back in Cedar Ridge, alone in her shop while the world passed by outside. Elias held her as she cried, not trying to fix it, just being present. You're safe, he murmured against her hair. You're home. You're loved. That last word hung between them. They'd shown love in countless ways, but never spoken it aloud. Clara pulled back to look at him in the moonlight filtering through their window. Loved, she whispered. Completely, Elias said simply. Desperately, eternally, loved. Oh, Elias, Clara breathed, touching his scarred face with gentle fingers. I love you too. So much it frightens me sometimes. Why does it frighten you? Because I never thought I'd have this. And sometimes I wake up afraid it's all been a dream, that I'll open my eyes and be back in that shop alone, watching other people live their lives. Elias kissed her, then deep and sure. This is real, Clara. We're real. And I'll spend every day proving it to you if I have to. The next morning brought a different kind of challenge. Elias returned from checking his trap lines with a young Native American boy, perhaps 10 years old, unconscious and burning with fever. Found him by the stream, Elias explained as they settled the child in their bed. No sign of his people. Looks like he's been alone for days. Clara immediately went into the mode that had served her well during the Morrison family illness. She cooled the boy's fever with wet cloths, forced water between his cracked lips, and used what medicine they had to fight what appeared to be a severe infection from a wound on his leg. For 3 days they took turns nursing the child. On the third night his fever finally broke. He woke terrified to find himself in a strange place with strange people. He spoke no English, and neither Clara nor Elias spoke his language, but Clara's gentle touch and Elias's calm presence gradually eased his fear. Through gestures and patience, they learned his name was something like Dakota, though they were probably pronouncing it wrong. He'd been separated from his hunting party during a storm and had been trying to find them when he injured his leg. We need to find his people, Clara said as she changed the boy's bandages. I know some of the tribes in this area, Elias said. I can put out word, but it might take weeks. Those weeks turned into some of the most profound of Clara's life. Dakota, as he healed, brought a new energy to their cabin. He was bright, eager to learn, and surprisingly funny once he realized they meant no harm. Clara taught him English words while he taught them his language. Elias showed him how to set traps the mountain man way, while Dakota demonstrated his people's methods. One evening, as they all sat around the fire with Dakota teaching them a game with stones from the river, Clara realized this was what she'd always dreamed of, but never dared hope for a family. Not conventional, not what Cedar Ridge would approve of, but real and warm and hers. It was Dakota who first called attention to how Clara had changed. Through gestures and his limited English, he indicated Clara, then made an ugly face, then pointed at the town direction and mimicked people laughing. Then he pointed at Clara again, made a beautiful gesture, and pointed at Elias with a smile. He's saying they thought you were ugly, Elias translated, having become adept at interpreting the boy's communications. But I see you as beautiful. Dakota nodded enthusiastically, then added more gestures. And you see yourself as beautiful now, too, Elias guessed. The boy clapped, pleased they understood. Clara hugged Dakota impulsively, and he leaned into her embrace with the trust of a child who'd found safety. 2 weeks later, a small group of Native Americans appeared at the edge of their clearing. Dakota cried out joyfully, running to an older man who was clearly his father. The reunion was touching, but Clara felt her heart breaking as she realized their makeshift family was about to shrink. The boy's father, who spoke some English, approached them. "You saved my son." "He saved us too," Clara said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "He brought joy to our home." The man studied them both, then spoke at length in his language to the others. After much discussion, he turned back to them. "You are friends to our people now, always welcome. And," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "the boy wishes to know if he can visit." "Any time," Elias said immediately. "He's always welcome here." Before leaving, Dakota ran to Clara and pressed something into her hand, a small carved bird beautifully detailed. He said something in his language, and his father translated, "He says you have learned to fly." After they left, the cabin felt empty. Clara found herself crying over the little bird carving, and Elias held her. "We could have children of our own," he said tentatively. "If you want." Clara had been thinking the same thing, but hadn't dared voice it. "I'm 32, almost 33. It might not happen. But you'd want to try." "Yes," she whispered. "Oh, yes." The rest of the summer passed in a blur of hard work and deepening love. They expanded the garden, preserved food for winter, and Elias taught Clara to shoot. She turned out to be surprisingly good at it. "You've got steady hands from all that detailed sewing," he explained as she hit her target for the 5th time in a row. "Or maybe I just have good motivation on," she said, thinking of protecting their home, their future children. September brought unexpected visitors. Clara was alone, Elias having gone to trade furs in a settlement 2 days away, when she heard horses approaching. She grabbed the rifle, as Elias had taught her, and stepped onto the porch. It was Margaret. Her sister sat in an expensive carriage dressed in silk and lace that looked absurd in the wilderness setting. Beside her sat a portly man who must be her banker husband, and they were accompanied by 2 hired guards. "Clara!" Margaret gasped clearly, not recognizing her sister immediately. Clara lowered the rifle but didn't put it away. "Margaret, you're far from Denver." We were in Cedar Ridge on business, and I had to see for myself if the rumors were true." Margaret climbed down from the carriage, her expensive boots immediately sinking into the mountain soil. "My God, Clara, what has happened to you?" "I got married," Clara said simply. "I found happiness." Margaret approached slowly as if Clara were a wild animal. "You look different. Your skin is so brown, and your hair. Clara, you're not even wearing proper clothes." She gestured at Clara's practical work dress and boots. "I'm wearing what suits my life," Clara replied. "This life." Margaret looked around with disgust. "Living like a savage in the wilderness, Clara, you're a Wade." "Our family has standing reputation." "Our family," Clara interrupted, "disowned me the moment it became clear I wouldn't marry advantageously. You haven't written to me in 5 years, Margaret. You don't get to show up now and lecture me about family honor." Margaret's husband finally spoke up. "See, here we've come to offer you rescue from this situation. Margaret feels responsible." "No," Clara said firmly. "You came because you're embarrassed, because people in Denver have heard that Margaret Wade Cunningham's sister married a mountain man, and you can't stand the gossip." Margaret's face flushed. "That's not—" "Clara, please, come with us. We'll say he died, that you're a widow. We can find you a position as a companion to some elderly lady in Denver. You'd be respectable again." "I am respectable," Clara said. "I'm a married woman who loves her husband and is loved in return. That's more respectable than anything you ever offered me." "Love," Margaret laughed bitterly. "Clara, look at yourself. You've been brainwashed by isolation. This man has turned you into something you're not." "No," Clara said softly. "He helped me become who I always was, just never had the chance to be." Margaret tried a different approach, tears forming in her eyes. "Clara, please. You're my sister. I'm trying to save you. Where was this concern when I wrote to you 3 years ago, begging for help when I was ill and couldn't work? Where was it when you told me not to attend your wedding because you didn't want your new husband's family to see me?" Margaret's tears dried instantly. "That was different. I was trying to protect you from embarrassment." You were protecting yourself, Clara said. You've always been protecting yourself. Well, now I'm protecting myself too. And what I'm protecting is the life I've built here with a man who sees my worth. Margaret's husband, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama, intervened. Perhaps we should go, my dear. Your sister has made her choice. A terrible choice, Margaret snapped. Clara, when this all falls apart, and it will, don't come crying to me. I won't, Clara assured her. I never have before, have I? As they prepared to leave, Margaret turned back one last time. You could have had a normal life if you just tried harder to be acceptable. I tried for 32 years, Clara replied. It nearly killed my soul. This life, the one you think is so terrible, it saved me. After they left, Clara sat on the porch shaking, not from fear or sadness, but from the strength it had taken to stand up to her sister, to defend her choices, to own her happiness. When Elias returned the next day, she told him everything. He listened in silence, then said, I'm proud of you. For sending her away. For choosing us. Over and over you keep choosing us. October arrived with a blaze of color in the aspens and the promise of another winter. Clara had been feeling unwell for weeks, tired, nauseated in the mornings. When she finally voiced her suspicions to Elias, his face transformed with hope. A baby. Maybe. I'm not certain, but... She placed his hand on her still flat stomach. I think so. Elias pulled her into his arms, his body trembling. Clara, a baby. Our baby. It might not... I'm not young, and sometimes these things don't... Then we'll face that if it happens, he said firmly. But right now, let's just hope. They decided to visit Doc Whitman to confirm Clara's condition. The trip to Cedar Ridge took on a different quality. This time they weren't just a married couple now, but potentially parents-to-be. The town's reaction to seeing them again was even more dramatic than before. Clara had continued to bloom in the mountains, her pregnancy giving her a glow that made her almost unrecognizable as the spinster seamstress she'd been. Doc Whitman confirmed what Clara suspected: she was about 3 months pregnant, due in the spring. Everything looks healthy, he assured them. But Clara, you're 33. This pregnancy might be more difficult than for a younger woman. You need to be careful. She will be, Elias said immediately. I'll make sure of it. As they left the doctor's office, they nearly collided with Prudence Baker and her daughter Isabel. Prudence's eyes immediately went to Clara's hand on her slightly rounded stomach, and her face went pale. You're with child? Yes, Clara said simply. Isabel, now 17 and unmarried despite her beauty, stared at Clara with something like envy. You look so happy, she said softly. I am, Clara replied not unkindly. Prudence pulled her daughter away, but Clara heard Isabel say, maybe being beautiful isn't enough, Mother. Maybe being loved is better. At the general store, stocking up on supplies for winter and special foods for Clara's pregnancy, they encountered Reverend Mitchell. Mrs. Boone, he said formally, then warmed slightly. You're looking well. I hear congratulations are in order. Thank you, Reverend. He hesitated, then said, I owe you an apology. When you married, I thought many uncharitable things. But I see now that God works in ways we don't always understand. You and Mr. Boone have found something many couples never do. What's that? Elias asked. True partnership, the Reverend said. It's rarer than you'd think. As they loaded their wagon, a crowd had gathered again. But this time the whispers were different. She's blooming like a rose. Never seen her look so alive. Maybe there's something to that mountain living. Look how protective he is of her. Mrs. Hammond approached cautiously. Clara, that is we. The ladies' auxiliary would like to give you some things for the baby. She held out a bundle of knitted blankets and tiny clothes. Clara was too surprised to speak for a moment. Thank you, she finally managed. We were wrong, Mrs. Hammond said quietly so only Clara could hear. About you, about him, about everything. You found what we all claim to want, but so few actually achieve real love. As they drove home, the wagon loaded with supplies and baby gifts, Clara marveled at the turn her life had taken. A year ago, they were placing bets on how quickly our marriage would fail, she said, and now Now I think they're starting to understand that we didn't fail at their version of life. We succeeded at our own. Winter came early that year, fierce and unforgiving. Clara's pregnancy progressed, and with it came challenges. The morning sickness lasted longer than expected, and there were days when she could barely keep food down. Elias fussed over her, constantly taking on all the heavy work, barely letting her lift anything heavier than a cooking pot. "I'm pregnant, not dying," Clara protested one morning as he insisted on hauling water from the stream alone. "You're carrying our child," he said firmly. "That's work enough." In December, when Clara was 6 months along, they were surprised by Dakota's return. The boy, accompanied by his father and uncle, brought gifts: soft furs for the baby, dried meat for the winter, and medicinal herbs their healer had sent specifically for pregnancy. Dakota had learned more English in their time apart. "Baby?" he asked, pointing at Clara's obvious belly. "Yes, baby," Clara confirmed, and the boy's face lit up. "I be brother?" he asked hopefully. Clara and Elias exchanged glances, touched by the question. "Yeah," Elias said. "Brother." The visit was short. The weather was too dangerous for long travel, but it lifted their spirits tremendously. After the native family left, Clara said, "Our child will grow up with such a different view of the world than either of us did." "Is that good?" "It's wonderful," Clara said. "They'll know that family isn't just blood, that beauty isn't just appearance, that home isn't just a place." Christmas in the mountains was unlike any Clara had experienced. No church service, no social obligations, just her and Elias in their warm cabin while snow fell steadily outside. He'd carved her a cradle for the baby, working on it in secret for months. She'd sewn him a new shirt, sturdy but with small decorative touches that showed her love in every stitch. They sang carols by the fire, just the two of them, their voices mixing in the silence of the snow-covered wilderness. When Clara felt the baby kick strongly for the first time, she grabbed Elias's hand and placed it on her belly. "There," she gasped. "Feel that." His eyes widened as he felt the movement. "Our child," he whispered in wonder. "Clara, our child is really in there." "Where did you think it was?" she laughed. "I knew, but feeling it makes it real in a different way." He kept his hand on her belly, tears streaming down his scarred face. "I never thought I'd have this. A wife, a child, a real family." "Neither did I," Clara admitted. "We were both so convinced we were meant to be alone." "Maybe we were," Elias said thoughtfully, "until we were meant to be together." January brought the worst blizzard in memory. They were completely snowed in for 3 weeks, the drifts reaching the roof in some places. It should have been claustrophobic, terrifying. Instead, Clara found it oddly peaceful. No possibility of visitors, no obligations except to each other and their survival. Elias read to her from his collection of books while she sewed baby clothes. They played cards, told stories from their childhoods, planned for the future. He taught her to carve simple figures from wood, laughing gently when her first attempt looked more like a misshapen potato than the bird she'd intended. "It has character," he said diplomatically. "It has lumps," Clara corrected, but she was laughing too. One night as the wind howled outside, Clara woke to find Elias sitting up in bed watching her in the moonlight. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing. Everything's right, so right it scares me sometimes." "Why does it scare you?" "Because I'm happy," he said simply. "Happier than I ever thought possible. And I keep waiting for something to take it away." Clara understood. The fear of happiness, the distrust of joy, these were the scars left by years of disappointment and rejection. "Nothing's going to take this away," she said firmly. "We've earned this, Elias, both of us." "You really believe that?" "I have to. We both do. Otherwise, what was the point of all that pain before February brought a brief thaw, allowing them to check on their animals and gather more firewood? Clara was huge now, moving slowly, her back aching constantly. But she'd never felt more alive, more purposeful. One afternoon, as she was organizing baby supplies for the 100th time, Elias said, "You know you're beautiful, don't you?" Clara looked up surprised. "Elias, I'm enormous. I waddle like a duck. I can't see my feet." "You're carrying our child," he said, moving to kneel beside her chair. You're creating life. You've never been more beautiful to me than you are right now. Even more than on our wedding night, she teased. Their wedding night had become something of a private joke between them, how the town had expected disaster, but they'd found tenderness instead. Especially more than then, Elias said seriously. Because now I know you, all of you, your strength, your kindness, your courage. Beauty isn't just what I see, Clara, it's what I know. March arrived with the promise of spring and the increasing likelihood that the baby would come soon. They'd planned to travel to town closer to Clara's time to be near Doc Whitman, but nature had other ideas. Clara's labor started during another late-season snowstorm. There was no possibility of getting to town, no chance of help arriving. It would be just the two of them. "We can do this," Elias said, though Clara could see the fear in his eyes. "Women have been having babies without doctors for thousands of years." "Not usually women my age," Clara gasped through a contraction. "You're not usual in any way," Elias said, trying to keep her spirits up. The labor was long difficult. There were moments when Clara thought she couldn't do it, when the pain was too much, when fear overwhelmed her. But Elias was there, steady as the mountains themselves, talking her through each contraction, reminding her of her strength. "Remember when you pulled me through that blizzard?" he said during a particularly bad moment. "You didn't think you could do that either, but you did." "That was different," Clara panted. "No, it was exactly the same. You're doing something impossible because it needed to be done." As dawn broke after a night of struggle, their son was born. He was small but strong, with lusty cries that filled the cabin. Elias cut the cord with shaking hands, wrapped the baby in the soft furs Dakota's family had given them, and placed him in Clara's arms. "He's perfect," Clara whispered, exhausted but euphoric. "He looks like you," Elias said, touching the baby's dark hair gently. "Poor child." Clara laughed weakly. "Lucky child," Elias corrected firmly. They named him Samuel after old Mr. Morrison, who had been kind when few others were, and Thomas after little Tommy Morrison, who had seen Clara's transformation with innocent eyes. The snow cleared enough after 3 days for Elias to ride to town for Doc Whitman. The doctor was amazed to find both mother and child healthy and thriving. "You did everything right," he told Elias. "You should be proud." "I'm married to the strongest woman in the territory," Elias said. "She did all the work." As Doc Whitman examined Clara and the baby, he said, "This child has changed you even more, Clara. There's something luminous about you now." "That's exhaustion," Clara said, but she was smiling. "No," the doctor said thoughtfully. "It's completion. Like you finally become exactly who you were meant to be." Word of the baby's birth spread through Cedar Ridge like wildfire. The same people who'd mocked their marriage now spoke in awed tones about Clara giving birth alone in a blizzard, about Elias delivering his own son, about the couple that had defied all expectations. When Clara finally brought baby Samuel to town in May, she was unprepared for the reception. Women who'd shunned her for years crowded around to see the baby. Men who'd laughed at Elias now clapped him on the back with genuine respect. "He's beautiful," Isabel Baker said wistfully. She was still unmarried, still beautiful in the conventional way, but there was a sadness in her eyes as she watched Clara with her son. "All babies are beautiful," Clara said kindly. "No," Isabel said. "He's beautiful because he's loved, because he was wanted, because his parents chose each other." She lowered her voice. "My mother's been trying to arrange a marriage for me with the banker's son. He doesn't love me. He just wants a pretty wife." "What do you want?" Clara asked. "What you have," Isabel admitted. "Someone who sees me, not just my face." Later, as they prepared to leave town with their wagon full of supplies and gifts for the baby, Reverend Mitchell approached. "I'd like to baptize your son," he said, "if you'll allow it." Clara looked at Elias, who nodded. "We'd be honored, Reverend." The baptism was simple but moving. The church was full, not with mockers this time, but with people who'd watched Clara's transformation with growing amazement and perhaps a touch of envy. As Reverend Mitchell poured water over Samuel's head, he said, "This child is blessed not just with life, but with parents who understand that true beauty comes from within, that real love sees past the surface and that the greatest strength is found in choosing to be vulnerable with another person. After the ceremony, as they stood outside the church with their son, old Mr. Morrison approached with his grandson Tommy, now 14 and tall for his age. "Mrs. Boone," Tommy said shyly, "I wanted to tell you something. You taught me to read, remember?" "Of course I remember." "Well, I've been thinking about what I want to be when I grow up, and I've decided I want to be a teacher, because you showed me that everyone has value, everyone can learn, everyone deserves a chance." Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. "That's wonderful, Tommy." As they finally headed home to their mountain cabin, Samuel sleeping peacefully in Clara's arms, Elias said, "They see you now, really see you." "No," Clara corrected. "They see what they missed before. But you, Elias Boone, you saw me from the beginning. And I'll keep seeing you," he promised, "every day for the rest of our lives." The summer that followed was one of deep contentment. Samuel grew strong and healthy, a happy baby who seemed as comfortable in the mountain wilderness as his parents had become. Dakota visited regularly, delighted with his brother, teaching him words in his native language alongside the English Clara and Elias spoke. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Samuel babbling happily in Clara's arms, Elias said, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't walked into your shop that day?" "I'd still be there," Clara said without hesitation. "Sewing other women's dresses, watching other people's lives through my window, dying a little more each day." "And I'd still be alone in these mountains," Elias added, "forgetting how to be human, how to love, how to hope." "Then thank God you needed a wife," Clara laughed. "I didn't need just any wife," Elias corrected. "I needed you, my Clara, my beautiful, strong, incredible Clara." As night fell and they went inside their cabin, their home, Clara caught sight of herself in the small mirror. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the spinster seamstress of Cedar Ridge. This woman stood tall, her face glowing with health and happiness, her eyes bright with love and purpose. She was holding a baby who looked at her like she was his whole world, standing next to a man who saw her as beautiful, not despite her flaws, but because of her wholeness. The transformation wasn't complete, though Clara didn't know it yet. That autumn, as Samuel learned to crawl and explore their cabin, with fearless curiosity, a new challenge arrived that would test everything they'd built together. It started with smoke on the horizon. Elias noticed it first during his morning trap run, a dark column rising from the direction of the Garrett homestead 5 miles north. The Garretts were their nearest neighbors, though near was relative in the mountains. "Stay here," Elias told Clara, grabbing his rifle. "Lock the door." "If someone needs help," Clara began. "You have Samuel to think about now," he said firmly. "Please, Clara, stay safe." But after he'd been gone 2 hours, Clara's worry overwhelmed her caution. She bundled Samuel onto her back in the carrier Dakota's mother had taught her to make and set out her own rifle in hand. She found Elias at what remained of the Garrett cabin. The structure was still smoldering, and he was kneeling beside 2 forms covered with blankets. "Clara, you shouldn't have come," he said, though his relief at seeing her was obvious. "The Garretts, dead, but not from the fire." He pulled back one blanket slightly, revealing a bullet wound. "Someone killed them first, then burned the cabin to cover it." Clara's blood ran cold. "Who would do such a thing?" Found tracks, 3 men, maybe 4, heading west toward the Dawson claim. Elias stood, his face grim. "Clara, we need to warn the others. There are killers in these mountains." They buried the Garretts quickly but respectfully. Then Elias rode to warn the scattered mountain families, while Clara returned home with Samuel. That night she barely slept, starting at every sound rifle within reach. Elias returned the next morning with troubling news. "The Dawsons are gone too, same way, shot, then burned out." "Dear God, who's doing this?" "I tracked them to a camp. 4 men heavily armed. They're systematically hitting the isolated homesteads, taking anything valuable." Elias's jaw clenched. "They're working their way south, toward us." "We should go to town," Clara said immediately. "Take Samuel somewhere safe." "That's 3 days' travel with the baby. They could catch us on the trail." Elias paced, thinking. "No, our best chance is to ford up here, wait for them to pass. And if they don't pass, Elias met her eyes steadily. Then we fight. The next 2 days were tense with waiting. Elias prepared their defenses, boarding up windows, setting up firing positions. Clara practiced with the rifle until her shoulder was bruised from the recoil. Samuel, sensing the tension, was fussy and difficult to settle. On the third night they came, Clara woke to Elias's hand over her mouth. "They're here," he whispered. "4 of them, just like I thought. Take Samuel to the root cellar." "I'm not leaving you to face them alone." Clarity, partners, remember. She was already reaching for her rifle. "Mrs. Chen can watch Samuel." They'd taken in the elderly Chinese woman 2 days earlier when her traveling party had been attacked by the same men. Elias started to protest, then nodded. They'd learned to trust each other's strength. Clara settled Samuel in the root cellar with Mrs. Chen, who clutched the baby protectively. "You be careful, Mrs. Boone," the old woman whispered. "That child needs his mother." "He needs both his parents," Clara corrected, "and he'll have them." She took her position at the east window while Elias covered the west. In the moonlight, she could see 4 shapes approaching their cabin. "Hello, the house," one called out. "We're travelers seeking shelter." "Travel on?" Elias called back. "Nothing for you here." "Now that's unfriendly," the voice replied. Clara could hear the mockery in it. "We heard you mountain folk were hospitable." "Not to murderers," Elias said flatly. A pause. Then, "Well, boys seems they know about our work. Makes this simpler." The first shot shattered the window near Clara's head. She didn't flinch, sighting down her rifle as Elias had taught her. When one of the men broke from cover running toward the cabin, she fired. He dropped. "There's a woman shooting," one of the attackers yelled. "He's got his woman fighting." "Good," another snarled. "More fun when they fight back." The battle that followed tested every bit of courage Clara had found in her mountain life. Bullets splintered wood around her, men's voices shouted obscenities and threats, but she held her position, reloading with steady hands, picking her shots carefully. Elias was magnificent, moving from window to window, making it seem like there were more defenders than just 2. But they were outnumbered, and the attackers were experienced. Then Clara heard something that chilled her blood, Samuel crying from the cellar. One of the men heard it too. "There's a baby in there," he shouted. "Hey, mountain man, you got yourself a whole family." "Tell you what, send out the woman and the baby and we'll let you die quick." "Go to hell," Elias snarled, but Clara heard the fear in his voice now. Fear not for himself, but for them. The attackers pressed closer, using the woodpile and outbuildings as cover. Clara was down to her last few bullets when she heard something else: horses. Many horses. Dakota's father appeared with a dozen warriors, having tracked the killers from the Dawson place. The tide turned instantly. The remaining attackers tried to flee but didn't get far. When it was over, Clara collapsed against Elias, shaking. "I've never killed anyone before," she whispered. "You protected our family," he said, holding her tight. "You were brave." I was terrified. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what needs doing despite the fear. Dakota's father approached them. "You fought well, both of you." He looked at Clara with respect. "The woman who was ugly is now a warrior. The spirits have remade you completely." Later, after the bodies had been dealt with and statements given to the sheriff, who finally arrived from town, Clara sat nursing Samuel, trying to process what had happened. "I'm not the same person who left Cedar Ridge," she said to Elias. "No," he agreed. "You're stronger." "It's not just that. When they threatened you, threatened Samuel, I would have done anything to protect you both. Anything. That spinster seamstress would have hidden and prayed. But I fought. Because you have something worth fighting for now." Mrs. Chen, who'd stayed with them after the attack, nodded wisely. "In China, we say the phoenix must burn before it can rise. You burned away who they told you to be. Now you are who you choose to be." News of the attack and Clara's part in defending her home spread through the territory. When they next went to Cedar Ridge, the reception was unlike anything before. Men tipped their hats respectfully. Women who'd once mocked her now looked at her with something approaching awe. Sheriff Bradley shook Elias's hand, then Clara's. "You two took down the garrison gang. We've been hunting them for months." We just defended our home, Clara said modestly, with more courage than most would have shown. Mrs. Boone, I owe you an apology. When you married, I thought you were making a terrible mistake. I see now the mistake was mine underestimating you. At the general store, Mr. Henley refused to take payment for their supplies. Heroes don't pay in my store, he said firmly. We're not heroes, Clara protested. You are to the families who won't be attacked by those men, he replied. Even Prudence Baker approached her usual haughtiness, replaced by something almost like humility. Clara, that is, we heard what you did, fighting off those killers, protecting your baby. Any mother would have done the same, Clara said. No, Prudence said quietly. They wouldn't. I wouldn't. I would have hidden and screamed and been useless. You've become something remarkable. Isabel, standing beside her mother, added, You've become who you really are. The rest of us are still pretending. That winter, their second with Samuel brought unexpected abundance. The story of their defense against the Garrison gang had spread far, and trappers and traders went out of their way to do business with Elias. Clara's skills as a seamstress were suddenly in demand again, with women from town willing to make the journey to her mountain cabin for her services. They want to see the woman who fought off bandits, Elias said with amusement, as another group of town ladies arrived for fittings. They want to understand how I changed, Clara corrected. They keep asking me for my secret. But what do you tell them? The truth. That I was always this person inside. I just needed someone to see it, believe in it, before I could become it. One of these visitors was young Isabel Baker, who came alone despite her mother's protests. She sat in Clara's kitchen holding Samuel while Clara worked on her dress. I'm refusing the banker's son, Isabel announced suddenly. Clara paused in her sewing. That's brave of you. Is it foolish I'm 18, in this town that's almost too old? If I refuse him, I might never marry. And would that be worse than marrying without love? Isabel considered this, watching Samuel grab at her necklace with chubby fingers. You were older than I am now when you married. Weren't you afraid of being alone forever? I was resigned to it, Clara admitted, but I'd rather have lived alone than lived a lie. When Elias came, it wasn't about escaping spinsterhood. It was about finding someone who saw me truly. How did you know he was the right one? Clara smiled, remembering. He looked at me like I was already beautiful. Not like I needed to change, but like he could see who I really was underneath everyone else's assumptions. I want that, Isabel whispered. I'm so tired of men who only see my face, who talk to my beauty instead of to me. Then wait for it, Clara advised. Even if it takes years, even if people mock you, wait for the one who sees you. Spring brought its own challenges and revelations. Samuel was walking now, toddling around the cabin and meadow with determined steps. He was a beautiful child with Clara's dark hair and Elias's gray eyes, but more than that, he was confident, secure in the love that surrounded him. One morning, Clara found Elias teaching Samuel to track rabbits in the soft earth near the garden. He's not even 2, she laughed. Never too early to learn, Elias said, but he was grinning. Besides, look how quick he is to understand. It was true. Samuel seemed to absorb everything around him with remarkable speed. He spoke in 2 languages, English and a smattering of the native words Dakota taught him. He knew the names of plants, could identify animal tracks, and showed no fear of the wilderness that was his home. He'll grow up so different from us, Clara mused. Better than us, Elias said, without our fears and doubts, without the wounds that shaped us, but with the strength we found in healing them. That afternoon brought unexpected visitors, a well-dressed couple from Denver. Clara recognized them immediately, though she'd only seen them once, Margaret's in-laws, the prestigious Cunningham family. Mrs. Boone, Mr. Cunningham Sr. said stiffly, "We've come on behalf of your sister." Clara's stomach tightened. "Is Margaret all right?" "She's troubled. Her husband has taken up with another woman. The scandal is significant. Margaret's position in society is compromised." "I'm sorry to hear that," Clara said carefully, "but I don't see how this concerns me." Mrs. Cunningham spoke up, her voice dripping with condescension. Margaret needs somewhere to retreat until the scandal dies down. We thought given your isolation here, it might serve. Clara almost laughed. You want Margaret to hide here with me, the sister she was so ashamed of? The situation has changed, Mr. Cunningham said. Your recent notoriety with that bandit incident has given you a certain reputation, brave pioneer woman and all that. If Margaret is seen staying with you, it might actually help her image. So I'm acceptable now because I killed a man defending my home. The Cunninghams shifted uncomfortably. We're willing to compensate you, Mrs. Cunningham offered. No, Claire said firmly. Margaret made her choice years ago. She doesn't get to use me as a hiding place now that her perfect life has cracked. But she's your sister, Mrs. Cunningham protested. She was my sister when she told me not to come to her wedding. She was my sister when she tried to drag me away from my husband. Where was this family feeling then? The Cunninghams left in high dudgeon, but Clara felt no regret. That evening she told Elias about the visit. You could have helped her, he said neutrally, shown you're the better person. I am the better person, Clara said. That's why I said no. Margaret needs to face her troubles, not hide from them, just like I had to face mine. And if she's truly desperate, Clara considered, then she can come asking herself, not sending others. She can apologize for the years of dismissal and shame. Then maybe I'll consider it. 2 weeks later, Margaret arrived. She looked terrible thin, hollow-eyed, her expensive clothes hanging loose. The proud sister who'd tried to rescue Clara from her mountain life was gone, replaced by a broken woman. Clara, she said from the porch, her voice small. May I come in? Clara studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. Margaret entered the cabin hesitantly, taking in the comfortable space, the books, the baby toys scattered about, the sense of home that permeated everything. It's not what I expected, she admitted. What did you expect? Animal skins and dirt floors? Yes, Margaret confessed. I expected squalor. Instead, she gestured helplessly. Instead, you have a home. A real home. Samuel toddled over, curious about the stranger. Margaret gasped softly. He's beautiful, Clara. This is Samuel, Clara said. Samuel, this is your Aunt Margaret. The boy studied Margaret solemnly, then offered her the wooden horse he'd been playing with. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I heard about the bandits, she said, how you fought them off. We did what we had to do. I could never have done it. I've never fought for anything in my life. I just accepted what I was given, played the role I was assigned. Margaret sank into a chair. And now it's all fallen apart. Clara made tea, letting her sister compose herself. When she set the cup before Margaret, her sister grabbed her hand. I'm sorry, Margaret whispered, for everything, for the wedding, for the years of silence, for trying to take you from this. I was so wrong, Clara, about everything. Why now? Clara asked, not unkindly, but needing to know. Because I've lost everything I thought mattered, and realized none of it did matter. My husband with his mistress, my so-called friends who've abandoned me, my position in society, it was all built on nothing. But you built something real. Elias returned from hunting to find the sisters talking. He greeted Margaret politely, but with reserve. Mr. Boone, Margaret said formally. I owe you an apology, too. I called you a savage, said terrible things. I was wrong. You were protecting your sister in your way, Elias said. I can respect that, even if I disagreed with your methods. Margaret stayed for a week. During that time, Clara watched her sister truly see her life for the first time. Margaret helped with chores clumsily, at first her soft hands blistering from the work. She played with Samuel, who warmed to her with a child's quick forgiveness. She sat by the fire in the evenings, listening to Elias's stories of the mountains, Clara's quiet wisdom about finding strength in unexpected places. You're happy, Margaret said one morning, watching Clara knead bread while Samuel played at her feet. Truly, deeply happy. I am. How did you go from being the town spinster to this? Clara considered. I stopped trying to be what they wanted and started being who I am. Elias saw me, the real me, from the beginning. That gave me courage to see myself. But you changed. You're beautiful now. No, Clara corrected. I'm the same person. Same face, same scars, same crooked nose, but I stand straighter because I'm not ashamed. I smile more because I have joy. I move with confidence because I know my worth. The beauty was always there, Margaret. It just needed the right eyes to see it. Margaret left with promises to write to visit again. As her carriage rolled away, Clara felt a chapter of her life closing. The sister who'd once been ashamed of her now looked up to her. Summer brought a celebration Samuel's second birthday. They held it in the meadow, and to Clara's surprise, people came from town to celebrate. The Morrisons' Doc Whitman, even Sheriff Bradley and his wife. Dakota's family arrived with gifts and songs. It was a gathering that would have been impossible to imagine 2 years ago. Look at this, Elias said, wonderingly, watching their guests mingle. Our boy has brought together people who never would have met otherwise. Our life has, Clara corrected. We've shown them that the boundaries they believed in don't have to exist. Reverend Mitchell had come too, and he pulled Clara aside. I wanted to tell you something, he said. Your story has become something of a legend in town. The ugly spinster who became a beautiful wife and mother who fought off bandits and made peace with the natives. That's not quite accurate, Clara said. No legends never are, but here's what matters. 3 young women have refused advantageous but loveless marriages this year, citing your example. They'd rather wait for real love than settle for security. Clara was stunned. I never meant to be an example. The best examples never do, the Reverend said. You just lived your truth, and that truth has shown others what's possible. As the party continued, Clara found herself watching Isabel Baker, who'd come despite her mother's disapproval. The girl was standing apart, watching the celebration with longing. Clara approached her. Any regrets about refusing the banker's son? None, Isabel said firmly. He's engaged to Martha Henley now. She seems pleased with the match. And you... I'm learning to be alone, to know myself without the mirror of men's admiration. Isabel smiled. It's harder than I expected, but also freeing. You're braver than I was at your age, Clara said. No, I'm just following the path you cleared. That evening, after the guests had gone and Samuel was asleep, Clara and Elias sat on their porch watching fireflies dance in the meadow. Do you ever miss it? Elias asked. Town Life Convenience Society? Do you ever miss being alone in the mountains? Clara countered. Never, he said immediately. Not for 1 second. Then you have your answer. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Elias said, I've been thinking about expanding, building another room or 2, maybe taking in travelers occasionally, hunters or traders who need shelter. You want to reduce our isolation. I want Samuel to grow up knowing how to navigate both worlds, the wilderness and civilization. And he hesitated. I'd like more children if we're blessed with them. They'll need space. Clara smiled, placing his hand on her still flat belly. Then you'd better start building soon. We'll need that space by spring. Elias's joy was incandescent. Another baby. Another baby. He pulled her into his arms, this man who'd seen her when no one else could, who'd given her the courage to become herself. Thank you, he whispered, for the baby, for everything, for saying yes that day in your shop, for seeing past my scars to who I could be, for fighting beside me, for making this lonely mountain into a home. Elias, Clara said softly, you saved me. No, he corrected. We saved each other. The autumn brought news from town that surprised everyone. Isabel Baker had announced her intention to become a teacher. She'd been corresponding with a school in Colorado that trained female educators. Mother is beside herself, Isabel told Clara during a visit. She says I'm throwing away my beauty on children who won't appreciate it. You're using your mind, Clara said. That's worth more than beauty. You used both, Isabel pointed out. You became beautiful and strong. I was always strong. I just had to find it. And the beauty, that's in the eye of the beholder. Everyone beholds it now, Shun, Isabel said. Even my mother admits you've become handsome. Clara laughed. Your mother's opinion stopped mattering to me long ago. I wish I could say the same. Give it time. The less you need others' approval, the more freely you can be yourself. Winter came early and hard, but Clara was prepared for it now. She knew how to read the signs, how to stock properly, how to keep the cabin warm and comfortable, even in the deepest cold. Her pregnancy progressed well easier than the first, despite her age. One snowy evening, as she sat sewing baby clothes while Elias played with Samuel by the fire, she realized that this quiet domestic scene was everything she'd never dared dream of in her spinster days. "What are you thinking?" Elias asked, noticing her contemplative mood. "About time," Clara said. "How 3 years ago I was sitting alone above my shop, certain I'd die there unmourned and unloved. And now you're loved beyond measure," Elias finished. "We both are." A knock at the door interrupted them, unusual in winter. Elias answered cautiously, rifle ready to find a young couple barely out of their teens shivering in the snow. "Please," the boy said through chattering teeth. "My wife, she's pregnant, and we got lost." Elias brought them in immediately. The girl was indeed pregnant, probably 7 months along, and both were nearly frozen. Clara sprang into action, warming blankets, heating soup, tending to their frostbitten fingers. As they thawed by the fire, their story emerged. They'd eloped against their family's wishes. He was poor, she was wealthy, the old story. They were heading west to California, but had gotten lost in the storm. "You can't travel in this weather," Clara said firmly. "You'll stay here until it clears." The young couple, James and Dorothy, stayed for 2 weeks. During that time, Clara saw herself and Elias reflected in them, two people who'd chosen love over convention, facing hardship together. "Were you scared?" Dorothy asked Clara one evening. "When you left everything you knew, terrified," Clara admitted, "but more scared of staying the same than of changing." "People say you transformed," Dorothy said. "That love made you beautiful." "No," Clara said gently. "Love made me brave enough to be myself. The beauty was always there waiting. Well, when the weather cleared and James and Dorothy left, they promised to write. You've shown us it's possible," Dorothy said, "to build a life on your own terms." Spring came with Clara's second son, born more easily than the first, despite her being 35 now. They named him William, after Elias's father. This time Doc Whitman was present for the birth, having come to stay with them the week before Clara's time. "You're remarkable," he told Clara afterward. "Most women your age wouldn't attempt one pregnancy in the mountains, let alone 2. "I'm not most women," Clara said, nursing little William while Samuel peered curiously at his new brother. "No," the doctor agreed. "You've become something entirely your own." The transformation of Clara Wade into Clara Boone was complete, but in truth it had never been a transformation at all. It had been an unveiling, a revealing of who she'd always been beneath the layers of others' expectations and her own fears. Years passed. Samuel grew tall and strong. William gentle and thoughtful. More children followed, a daughter named Hope, another son called Marcus. The cabin expanded into a proper homestead, becoming a way station for travelers, a place of refuge for those who didn't fit society's narrow molds. Isabel Baker became Isabel Chen, marrying Mary Chen's brother and scandalizing the town. They often visited Clara and Elias, bringing their mixed-race children to play with the Boone children in the mountain meadow where prejudice couldn't reach. Margaret rebuilt her life humbler but happier and visited yearly. Each time she marveled at Clara's contentment, her beauty that seemed to grow rather than fade with age. "You've reversed time," Margaret said during one visit, watching Clara, now 40, chase her children through the wildflowers. "You're more beautiful now than you were at 20. "I'm more myself," Clara corrected. "That's all beauty ever was, being fully unapologetically yourself." One evening, as Clara and Elias sat watching their children play with Takota's children, he'd grown up and married, bringing his family often to visit. Elias said, "They were all wrong about us." "Who?" "Everyone who mocked us, who said I was crazy for choosing you, who said you were desperate for accepting me." Clara leaned into his still strong shoulder. "They weren't wrong. They just couldn't see what we saw." "And what did we see?" "Each other," Clara said simply. "Really see each other. And in that seeing, we became." The years had been kind to them, but kindness in the mountains came with its own tests. When Hope was 5 and Marcus just 3, a drought struck the territory unlike anything in memory. The stream that had never run dry in Elias's 15 years there dwindled to a trickle by midsummer. Clara stood in what had been their vegetable garden, now rows of withered stalks, while Elias dug deeper wells searching for water. Their children, accustomed to abundance, didn't understand why bathwater had to be saved, why the creek where they loved to play had become a dry bed of stones. "We might have to leave," Elias said one evening, his voice heavy with defeat. "Take the children to town until the rains come." "No," Clara said firmly. "This is our home. We've faced worse." "Have we?" "The children need water, Clara. We can't let pride—" "It's not pride," she interrupted. "It's faith. In this place and us, in our ability to survive whatever comes." That night, Dakota arrived with his father and several other tribal members. They brought water in large containers, a gift from their river, which still ran through lower than usual. "You helped us," Dakota said, now a young man of 20 with his own infant son. "Now we help you." The drought taught their children lessons no comfortable town life could have provided. Samuel at 11 learned to haul water from the distant river without complaint. William at 9 became expert at finding edible plants that survived without much water. Even little Hope and Marcus learned conservation, treating every drop as precious. One evening, as the family shared a meager dinner, Hope asked, "Mama, why don't we just move to town where there's water?" "Because," Clara said, looking at each of her children, "easy isn't always better. What we're learning here, how we're growing stronger together, that's worth more than convenience." "Your mother's right," Elias added. "In town you'd have water, but you wouldn't learn that you can survive without abundance, that family and community matter more than comfort." The drought broke in September with rains that seemed miraculous. The children danced in the downpour while Clara and Elias stood on the porch, arms around each other, grateful beyond words. "You were right," Elias said. "About staying." "We were right," Clara corrected. "Together." That winter brought a different kind of test. A letter arrived from Boston from a lawyer Clara had never heard of. Her aunt, her mother's sister, whom Clara had met only once as a child, had died and left her entire estate to "my niece Clara, who like me seemed destined for spinsterhood, but who I hope has found her own path." The inheritance was substantial enough to build a fine house in any city, to educate their children in the best schools, to live in comfort for the rest of their lives. $20,000, Elias said, staring at the letter. "See, Clara, this changes everything." "Does it?" Clara asked. "What would we do with it? We could move to Denver, San Francisco even. The children could have proper schooling opportunities we can't give them here." Clara watched their children through the window, Samuel teaching William to track deer hope and Marcus building snow figures. They were laughing, healthy, confident. "What opportunities?" Clara asked. "To learn to judge others by their appearance, to value money over character, to forget that real beauty comes from within. To have choices," Elias said gently, "to not be limited by isolation." Clara was quiet for a long moment. "Let me think about it." She thought for 3 days, walking the paths she'd come to know so well, remembering the woman she'd been and considering the woman she'd become. On the third evening, she gathered the family. "We've received a gift," she told the children, explaining about the inheritance. "It's enough money to change our lives completely. We could move to a city, live in a grand house, you could go to fancy schools." Samuel, ever practical, asked, "But what about our home here?" "We'd have to leave it," Elias said. William's face crumpled. "Leave the mountains, leave Dakota and his family. We'd make new friends," Clara said, though her heart wasn't in it. Hope, with a 5-year-old's clarity, asked, "But would we still be us?" That simple question crystallized Clara's decision. "No," she said. "We wouldn't. We'd become different people shaped by different values." She looked at Elias. "I say we keep some for emergencies, use some to help our neighbors who are struggling, and donate the rest to that school for Native children that Reverend Mitchell mentioned." "You're sure?" Elias asked. "I've never been more sure of anything, except marrying you." The children cheered, relieved they wouldn't have to leave their mountain home. Elias pulled Clara close. Your aunt would be proud. I think she would, Clara agreed. She understood that being alone by choice is better than being together for the wrong reasons, and being together for the right reasons that's worth more than any amount of money. They kept $5,000 enough to weather any crisis. The rest they distributed to the native school, to families still recovering from the drought, to a fund for young women in Cedar Ridge who wanted education beyond what the town could offer. The town's reaction was predictable. "She's gone mad," Prudence Baker declared, throwing away a fortune to stay in that wilderness. But Isabel, now Isabel Chen, and mother to two beautiful children who faced their own challenges in a world that didn't quite know how to categorize them, understood perfectly. "She knows who she is," Isabel told her mother, "and she knows what actually matters. That's not madness, that's wisdom." The following spring brought an unexpected visitor. Clara was teaching Hope and Marcus their letters when a well-dressed woman appeared at their door. She was perhaps 40, handsome in a severe way, with intelligent eyes that took in everything. "Mrs. Boone, I'm Catherine Hartley from the Denver Women's Journal. I've come to write about you." Clara was bewildered. "Write about me? Why, you've become something of a legend, Mrs. Boone. The ugly spinster who transformed into a beautiful mountain woman who fought off bandits who gave away a fortune to stay in the wilderness. Women across the territory are fascinated by your story." "It's not," Clara began, then stopped. "Come in, Miss Hartley. But if you're going to write about me, you need to understand the truth, not the legend." Catherine stayed for a week, following Clara through her daily routines, watching her with her children, observing her interactions with Elias. She interviewed everyone, the children, Dakota's family, even grudging townspeople. "You're not what I expected," Catherine admitted on her third day. "What did you expect?" "Someone harder, I suppose, someone made bitter by early rejection who found revenge in later success. Instead, you're gentle, kind. You've forgiven everyone who hurt you." "I haven't forgiven them," Clara corrected. "I've forgotten them. They're simply not important enough to my life now to waste energy on forgiveness or anger." Catherine interviewed Elias separately, and Clara could hear his deep voice carrying through the cabin walls, though not his words. When Catherine emerged, she had tears in her eyes. "He loves you," she said simply. "The way he talks about you, I've interviewed hundreds of couples, Mrs. Boone. I've never heard anyone speak of their spouse the way your husband speaks of you." "How does he speak of me?" "Like you're a miracle he witnesses every day. Like your transformation wasn't from ugly to beautiful, but from hidden to revealed. He says you were always who you are now, just waiting for someone to see it." The article Catherine wrote, published 3 months later, created a sensation. But it wasn't the story people expected. Instead of a fairy tale transformation, Catherine told the truth about the pain of rejection, the courage it took to accept Elias's proposal, the slow building of trust and love, the choice to stay true to themselves rather than conform to others' expectations. The article concluded, "Clara Boone is indeed beautiful now, at 41, mother of 4, living in mountain isolation. But her beauty isn't a transformation, it's a revelation. She is beautiful because she is fully herself, because she stands straight under no one's judgment, because she knows her worth isn't determined by others' opinions. She didn't become beautiful when Elias Boone married her. She became beautiful when she decided she was worthy of being seen, and he was simply the first to look." Whilst letters poured in from women across the country, Clara was overwhelmed, spinsters writing to thank her for giving them hope. Married women saying her story made them examine their own compromises. Young girls declaring they would wait for someone who truly saw them, rather than settling for the first proposal. "I never meant to become a symbol," Clara told Elias, reading through the letters. "You didn't try to be," he replied. "That's why it matters." One letter stood out. It was from Isabel's mother, Prudence Baker. "Dear Clara, I have spent years thinking about what to write to you. My daughter shows me your kindness every time we speak, though I deserve none of it. I was cruel to you not from malice, but from fear. You represented what I most feared, being unwanted, unloved outside society's approval. I pushed you down to push down my own terror of insignificance. Watching your rise hasn't been easy for me, not because I begrudge your happiness, but because it shows me how empty my own victories have been. My daughter, whom I raised to value beauty above all, found her worth in her mind and her courage following your example, not mine. She is happy in a marriage I tried to prevent, raising children I was ashamed of at first, but who now bring me joy I never expected. I am 60 years old, Clara, and only now beginning to understand what you knew all along, that beauty is not in the face, but in the wholeness of a person. That love is not about meeting expectations, but about seeing and being seen truly. I don't ask for forgiveness. I ask only that you know you have changed more lives than you realize, including mine. With respect and regret, Prudence Baker. Clara read the letter 3 times, then handed it to Elias. I never expected this. You changed her by becoming yourself, Elias said. That's more powerful than trying to change anyone directly. But that summer, Samuel, now 14, announced his intention to attend college when he was old enough. I want to be a doctor, he said, like Doc Whitman, but I want to come back here, serve the mountain families and the tribes. Claire's heart swelled with pride and a touch of sadness. Her children would leave eventually, but they would leave as whole people confident in who they were. We'll make it happen, Elias promised. That money we saved, it's for your futures. William at 12 had different dreams. I want to stay here, he said. Learn everything Papa knows about the mountains. Maybe build my own cabin nearby, raise a family here. Hope 7 now, and fierce as her name suggested, declared, I want to write stories like the lady who visited, tell true things that help people. Marcus, only 5, just wanted to be like Coda. I want to be everyone's friend, he said simply. Those are all good dreams, Clara told them. And you know what? You can change them as you grow. The important thing is to choose for yourselves, not let others choose for you. Autumn brought a tragedy that shook their mountain community. The Jeffersons, a family who'd homesteaded 10 miles north, lost everything in a fire: their cabin, their winter supplies, everything except the clothes on their backs. They had 3 young children and nowhere to go. Without hesitation, Clara and Elias took them in. Their cabin, expanded over the years, but still modest, suddenly housed 11 people. It's too much, Mrs. Jefferson wept. We can't impose like this. It's not imposing, Clara said firmly. It's community. You do the same for us. And it was true. The weeks that followed proved that their children had learned the right lessons. Samuel and William helped Mr. Jefferson build a temporary shelter nearby. Hope shared her dolls with the Jefferson girls without being asked. Marcus, young as he was, offered his favorite blanket to the youngest Jefferson child. Your children, Mrs. Jefferson said one evening, watching them all play together. They're remarkable, so generous, so kind. They're who they've been allowed to be, Clara replied. When you don't teach children to judge by appearance or circumstance, they don't. The Jeffersons stayed through winter, and by spring the community had come together to help them rebuild. It was during this time that Clara noticed something. She was being watched by a young woman who came with the supply wagons from town. The woman was perhaps 25, plain-featured, standing always at the edges of groups. Clara recognized the posture, the careful invisibility. She approached her one day. I'm Clara Boone, she said gently. I know who you are, the woman replied. Everyone knows. I'm Ruth Palmer. Would you like to come in for tea, Ruth? Over tea, Ruth's story emerged. An orphan working as a servant in town, saving money for she didn't know what. I read about you, she said shyly, in that article. It gave me hope that maybe someone might see me too someday. Someone will, Clara assured her. But first you need to see yourself. Ruth became a regular visitor, helping with the children, learning from Clara not about beauty, but about self-worth. It was Samuel who noticed her first as more than Clara's project. Miss Ruth is smart, he told his mother. She reads all the books I bring from town, and she understands them better than I do sometimes. Clara smiled to herself, watching her son begin to see what others missed. He was learning young what Elias had known instinctively, to look deeper than surfaces. The following year brought changes that would test everything Clara and Elias had built. The railroad was coming through the valley below their mountain. With it would come settlers' development, the encroachment of the civilization they'd chosen to live apart from. They want to buy our land, Elias said, holding the offer from the railroad company. $50,000, Clara. $50,000. Clara looked at the number, more money than most people saw in a lifetime. Then she looked out the window at Hope and Marcus playing in the meadow, where wildflowers grew at William, helping his father repair the fence at Samuel, sitting under a tree tutoring Ruth Palmer in Latin, because she'd expressed interest in learning. No, she said simply. Clara, think about it. We could buy land elsewhere, even more remote, if that's what we want. This is our home, Clara said. This is where we became us. This is where our children learned to be themselves. You can't buy that anywhere. Elias studied her, then smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. I already told them no, but I wanted you to have the choice. You knew what I'd choose. I knew who you are, Elias corrected. Someone who knows the difference between price and value. The railroad came through the valley bringing noise and strangers and change, but up on their mountain, the Boone family continued their life adjusted but not compromised. They dealt with the new reality. Supplies were easier to get, medical help closer if needed, but also more intrusions, more people coming to gawk at the famous Clara Boone. One such group arrived on a summer afternoon, society ladies from Denver, on what they called an adventure tour. They tittered and gasped at the primitive conditions, took sketches of the cabin, and stared at Clara like she was an exhibit. You could live in luxury, one said. Why choose this? Before Clara could answer, Hope, now 10 and fierce, spoke up. Because luxury isn't things, it's being who you are without apology. The ladies laughed condescendingly. What a quaint thing to teach children. It's not quaint, William said, his quiet voice carrying strength. It's true. You're all dressed in silk and jewels, but you came here to see my mother because she has something you don't. And what's that young man? One lady asked, amused. Peace with herself, Samuel said, joining his siblings. She doesn't need your approval or anyone else's. The ladies left quickly after that, offended but unable to articulate why. Clara hugged her children, proud beyond words. You're raising warriors, so Elias said that evening. We're raising people who know their worth isn't negotiable, Clara corrected. Ruth Palmer had become part of their extended family by then, and it surprised no one when Samuel at 18 announced he wanted to marry her before leaving for college. She'll wait for me, he said, and I want to know she's protected part of our family officially. Ruth had bloomed under the Boone's acceptance, not into conventional beauty, but into something better. Confidence, intelligence, allowed to shine, kindness given space to flourish. You're both so young, Clara said, though she remembered being dismissed for being too old at their age. We're sure, Ruth said simply. Samuel sees me the way your husband sees you. That's worth everything. The wedding was small, held in the meadow in spring. Ruth wore a simple dress. Clara had made wildflowers in her hair. Samuel looked at her the way Elias had looked at Clara that day in the church, like she was already beautiful, had always been beautiful, just waiting for the right eyes to see. Reverend Mitchell, older now, but still serving, performed the ceremony. I've married many couples, he said, but the Boone family marriages, first Clara and Elias, now Samuel and Ruth, these are the ones that restore my faith in the institution. Because they're based not on appearance or convenience or social expectations, but on truly seeing another person and choosing them completely. As Clara watched her son marry a woman the town considered plain, she thought about cycles, about how what we teach our children echoes through generations. Samuel had learned from watching his parents that beauty was in the eye of the beholder, and the beholder's eye could be trained to see truly or falsely. That fall, with Samuel and Ruth in Denver, where he was attending medical school, William announced his own plans. I'm courting Elizabeth Jefferson, he said, referring to the eldest daughter of the family they'd sheltered. She's lovely, Clara said, for Elizabeth had grown into a traditionally beautiful young woman. That's not why, William said quickly. It's because when their family had nothing, she never complained. She helped rebuild without being asked. She sees the mountains the way I do not, as isolation but as freedom. Then court her properly, Elias said, and remember, beauty fades, but character endures. Hope at 15 had begun writing seriously, sending stories to magazines under a pseudonym. When one was accepted for publication, she danced around the cabin with joy. It's about a woman who thinks she's ugly until she realizes she's been looking in the wrong mirrors, she explained. Write what you know, Clara said, proud of her daughter's insight. I do, Hope replied. I write about you, Mama, about how you didn't become beautiful, you just stopped believing you were ugly. Marcus at 13 had indeed become everyone's friend, moving easily between the mountain families, the townspeople, and Dakota's tribe. He had a gift for languages and peacemaking, often translating not just words, but cultures. "I want to be a diplomat," he announced. "Help different people understand each other." "You already do that," Clara told him, "but I want to do it bigger. Maybe help make treaties that are fair to everyone, not just the powerful." Clara marveled at her children, each finding their own path, but all carrying the core lesson of their upbringing that every person had worth beyond what the eye could see. Winter came early that year, and with it unexpected news. Margaret wrote that she was ill, possibly dying, and wanted to see Clara one last time. Clara made the difficult journey to Denver, leaving Elias with the younger children. She found Margaret much changed, thin, frail, but with a peace in her eyes that had never been there before. "I'm not afraid," Margaret said. "Thanks to you. I didn't do anything. You showed me that life is about more than meeting expectations. These last years since Charles left me, I've actually lived for the first time. I've taught poor children to read, used my money for good instead of show. I've been happy, Clara, truly happy." "I'm glad," Clara said, holding her sister's hand. "I need to tell you something," Margaret said. "About Mother." Clara stiffened. Their mother had died when Clara was 20, never having shown her youngest daughter affection. "She was like you," Margaret said. "Plain, rejected, made to feel worthless. Father married her for her dowry, never loved her. She saw in you what she most hated in herself." Clara felt tears come. "Why didn't she—" "She couldn't see past her own pain to yours. But you, Clara, you broke the cycle. You didn't let rejection make you bitter. You found someone who saw you truly, and you raised children who see others truly. You changed our family's story." Margaret died 2 days later. Clara holding her hand. At the funeral, Clara was surprised by how many people came, not society people, but children. Margaret had taught families she'd helped people who'd known the real Margaret that emerged in her final years. Returning home, Clara found her family waiting the cabin warm with light and love. As she told them about Margaret's final days, she realized that her sister had experienced her own transformation, not of appearance but of purpose. "She found herself at the end," Clara said. "That's all any of us can hope for, to know who we really are before we go." Years continued to pass. Samuel became a doctor and returned as promised, setting up practice in a cabin near his parents, serving the mountain families and tribes, with Ruth by his side. They had 3 children who grew up calling Clara grandmother, with the same love whether they were blood or chosen family. William married Elizabeth Jefferson and built his own homestead within walking distance. Their children grew up wild and free in the mountains, confident in themselves. Hope became a successful writer, though she used a pen name, and few knew that the famous author lived in a mountain cabin. She never married, declaring she'd rather be alone than with someone who didn't see her fully. Marcus did become a diplomat eventually, helping negotiate fair treaties between settlers and native tribes, using the understanding he'd gained growing up between worlds. On Clara's 60th birthday, the family gathered children, grandchildren, Dakota's family, the Jeffersons, even people from town who'd come to respect what Clara and Elias had built. "Look at this," Elias said, now 73 but still strong. "Look at what grew from 2 outcasts finding each other." "We weren't outcasts," Clara corrected. "We were just in the wrong place. Once we found the right place, we flourished." Ruth, now in her 40s and a grandmother herself, raised a toast. "To Clara Boone, who showed us all that beauty isn't about what others see in you, but about what you see in yourself. And what you help others see in themselves," added Samuel. As Clara looked around at the gathered faces, all different, all beautiful in their own ways, all seeing each other truly, she thought about that scared spinster in Cedar Ridge who'd thought herself worthless. That woman hadn't transformed. She'd simply been waiting like a seed in dark soil for the right conditions to bloom. Elias had been the sun and rain, but the life force had always been there, waiting. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying across the meadow. "All of you. For seeing me, for letting me see you, for proving that beauty, real beauty, is just truth made visible." As the celebration continued into the night, Clara walked to the edge of the meadow with Elias. They stood together looking at the stars, comfortable in the silence that comes from decades of understanding. "Do you ever regret it?" Elias asked. "Choosing this life? Choosing me?" Clara turned to him. This man who'd seen her when no one else could, whose scars had never made him less beautiful to her, whose love had given her the courage to become herself. "How can I regret finding home?" she asked. "You weren't just my husband, Elias. You were my mirror, the first true mirror I'd ever looked into. And in your eyes, I finally saw who I really was." "And who was that?" "Someone worthy of being seen, someone capable of seeing others, someone beautiful not because my face changed, but because I finally believed I had the right to exist fully, completely, without apology." They walked back to the celebration hand in hand, an elderly couple who'd found each other in middle age, who'd built a life that defied every expectation, who'd raised children to see beyond surfaces, who'd proved that transformation isn't about changing who you are, but about revealing who you've always been. The celebration continued late into the night, but Clara noticed Elias growing tired, leaning more heavily on his walking stick. At 73, he was still strong, but the years of mountain living had taken their toll. She guided him gently to their favorite bench away from the crowd. "I'm fine," he protested, but his breathing was labored. "Rest with me," Clara said simply, and he didn't argue further. As they sat watching their family celebrate, a young woman approached hesitantly. Clara didn't recognize her at first. She was perhaps 20, beautiful in the conventional way that Clara had never been, with golden hair and delicate features. But there was something in her posture, a familiar uncertainty. "Mrs. Boone, I'm Charlotte Hammond, Mayor Hammond's granddaughter." Clara remembered now. The mayor who had tried to talk Elias out of proposing all those years ago had died a decade back, but his family remained prominent in Cedar Ridge. "What brings you to our celebration, Charlotte?" Clara asked kindly. The young woman's perfect face crumpled. "I need help, and everyone says you're the only one who might understand." Elias squeezed Clara's hand and stood. "I'll give you privacy," he said, moving slowly back toward the party. Charlotte took his place on the bench, her hands twisting in her lap. "I'm supposed to marry next month. Harrison Blackwood. He's wealthy, handsome, everything a girl like me should want." "But," Clara prompted, "but he doesn't see me. He sees this," Charlotte gestured at her face, her figure. "He shows me off like a prize horse. When I try to talk about books or ideas, he laughs and tells me pretty girls don't need thoughts." Clara's heart ached with familiar pain, though from the opposite direction. "And you're afraid to refuse him. Everyone says I'm lucky, that a girl like me has one asset, my looks, and I'd be a fool not to capitalize on it before it fades." Charlotte's voice broke. "But I watch you with Mr. Boone the way he looks at you even now at 60, and I think I'd rather be alone than be with someone who only sees my surface." "That's a brave thought," Clara said carefully. "But are you prepared for what comes next? The disappointment, the gossip, the people who'll say you're too proud, too particular." Charlotte met her eyes. "Were you, when you were my age, alone, watching everyone else pair off?" "No," Clara admitted. "I wasn't prepared, but I survived it. And eventually I found something real." "You were 32 when Mr. Boone proposed." 32 years of being overlooked, yes. But Charlotte, those years shaped me. They taught me to value myself when no one else did. When Elias came, I knew my worth wasn't dependent on him. He just helped me see it more clearly. Charlotte was quiet for a moment. "My mother says I'm being foolish, that beauty is currency and I should spend it while I have it." "Your mother isn't wrong from a certain perspective," Clara said. "Beauty is currency in the world she knows. But there are other worlds, Charlotte. Worlds where different things have value." Before Charlotte could respond, there was a commotion at the party. Samuel was calling for his mother urgently. Clara rushed over to find Ruth in labor a month early. "It's coming fast," Samuel said, his doctor's training warring with his husband's panic. "Too fast to get her home." Clara took charge immediately, decades of mountain birthings making her calm. "Hope get the quilts from the cabin. William boiling water. Marcus take the children away, they don't need to see their mother in pain." She turned to Charlotte, still standing uncertain at the edge of the action. "Can you help, or do you need to leave?" Charlotte surprised her. "I'll help. Tell me what to do." For the next 3 hours, as Ruth labored and Samuel tried to maintain professional composure while his wife suffered, Charlotte proved herself. She held Ruth's hand, wiped her brow, never flinched at the mess and pain of birth. When the baby finally came, a healthy girl despite being early, Charlotte was the first besides the parents to hold her. "She's perfect," Charlotte whispered, tears streaming down her beautiful face. "This is real. This is what matters." Clara watched the young woman's transformation, not of appearance, but of understanding. "You see it now," she said quietly. "How did I miss it?" Charlotte asked. "All my life focused on mirrors and dresses and catching the right man's eye, and this life, real life, was happening all around me." Ruth, exhausted but radiant, reached for Charlotte's hand. "It's not too late. It's never too late to start seeing clearly." Charlotte stayed for 3 days, helping with the new baby, talking with Hope, about writing, learning from Ruth, about finding yourself outside others' expectations. When she finally left, she hugged Clara tightly. "I'm calling off the wedding," she announced. "I don't know what comes next, but I know what doesn't. I won't marry someone who can't see past my face." "It will be hard," Clara warned. "Hard is better than false," Charlotte replied, and Clara heard her own younger self in those words, finally understanding that authenticity was worth any price. After Charlotte left, Elias said, "You've become what you never had, a guide for lost young women." "We all need someone to show us it's possible," Clara replied. "I had you. Now others have me." But that night Elias's breathing was worse. Doc Whitman, semi-retired but still practicing, examined him the next morning. "His heart," the doctor said quietly to Clara. "It's wearing out. He needs rest, no exertion." "For how long?" Clara asked, though she feared the answer. "Clara," Doc Whitman's voice was gentle. "We're talking about comfort now, not cure." The world seemed to tilt. Elias, her rock, her mirror, her home dying. She found him on the porch, whittling as always, and sat beside him. "Doc told you," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes." "Are you angry that I'm leaving you?" Clara leaned into him, breathing in his familiar scent of wood smoke and pine. "I'm grateful. For every day we've had. For every day we have left. It might not be many. Then we'll make them count." They did. That autumn was perhaps their sweetest, each day precious, because it might be their last together. Elias taught William his final secrets about the mountains. He told Samuel stories about his mother's courage that the boy had never heard. He walked with Hope through the meadows, encouraging her writing. He taught Marcus the native songs Dakota's father had taught him. And with Clara, he simply was. They sat together, watching sunsets, holding hands like newlyweds. They talked about their life, their children, their unlikely love story. "I have one regret," Elias said one evening as the first snow began to fall. "What's that? That I didn't find you sooner, that you had to wait so long to be seen." "But if you'd found me sooner, I might not have been ready," Clara said. "All those years of loneliness taught me to value what we have. A younger me might have taken it for granted." "You never took anything for granted," Elias said. "It's one of the things I love most about you." Winter came hard and fast. Elias rarely left the cabin now, his breathing labored with any exertion. The children visited constantly, the grandchildren filling the cabin with laughter that seemed to give him strength. One evening, Charlotte Hammond arrived through a blizzard, accompanied by someone Clara didn't expect, Isabel Chen, her hair now silver, her face lined but still lovely. "Charlotte's been staying with me," Isabel explained. "Since she broke her engagement, her family won't speak to her. I understand something about that." Charlotte had changed in the months since the birthday party. Her beauty was still there, but it was no longer the first thing you noticed. She stood straighter, spoke with more purpose, looked people in the eye differently. "I've been teaching at the native school," Charlotte said. "Using the money from my dowry, father can't take it back. It was grandmother's gift. The children don't care that I'm pretty. They care that I show up, that I teach them, that I see them as people." "Good," Clara said simply. "That's very good." Elias, from his chair by the fire, smiled. "Another transformation," he said to Clara. "You're contagious." That night, as the blizzard raged, Elias's breathing grew worse. Clara sat beside him, holding his hand while he struggled for each breath. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Not of dying, of leaving you." "You won't leave me," Clara said firmly. "You'll be in every strong choice I make, every person I help see clearly, every grandchild who learns to look deeper than surfaces. You'll be in the mirror every time I remember that someone saw me as beautiful." "You are beautiful," he whispered. "You always were. I just had the right eyes." "And you gave me those eyes," Clara said, "to see myself, to see others. That doesn't die with you, my love. It lives on in everyone we've touched." By morning, the storm had passed, and so had Elias Boone. He died as he'd lived quietly without fanfare, holding Clara's hand. The funeral brought people from all over the territory. Natives and settlers, rich and poor, beautiful and plain, all united in grief for a man who'd seen truly and loved deeply. Reverend Mitchell, ancient now but determined to perform this last service, spoke at the grave. Elias Boone was called a bees, a savage, a man outside civilization. But he was the most civilized man I knew. He understood that civilization isn't about conforming to society's rules, it's about seeing the humanity in everyone, about choosing love over convention, about building something real in a world full of facades. Clara stood with her children around her grandchildren, clinging to her skirts, and felt both broken and whole. Broken because half of her was gone. Whole because what they'd built together remained. After the service, people approached her one by one. Some, like Prudence Baker, now elderly and frail, came to offer condolences. Others came to tell her how Elias had helped them, traded fairly with them, shown them kindness when the town wouldn't. But it was young Charlotte who said what mattered most. "He saw you," she said simply. "And because he saw you, you could see others. And because you saw us, we could see ourselves. That's his real legacy, isn't it? All of us who learned to see." Clara nodded, unable to speak through her tears. The first months without Elias were the hardest. The cabin felt too large, the bed too empty, the silence too complete. But slowly, Clara found her rhythm again. She had work to do, grandchildren to help raise young women like Charlotte, to guide a legacy to tend. Samuel and Ruth insisted she move in with them, but Clara refused. "This is my home," she said. "Elias is here in every board he laid, every shelf he built, every view he showed me. I won't leave him." Instead, they worked out a system. Family members took turns staying with her, ensuring she was never alone too long while respecting her need for solitude. It was during one of these solitary periods that Clara began to write. Not stories like hope, but memories. The true account of an ugly spinster and a scarred mountain man who'd found each other, and in finding each other, found themselves. She wrote about the mockery, the pain of being unseen. She wrote about Elias's proposal and the town's reaction. She wrote about their wedding night, not the details, but the tenderness, the discovery that she was desirable. She wrote about the bandits, the drought, the hard choices. She wrote about their children learning to see beyond surfaces. And she wrote about transformation, not the fairy tale kind where ugly becomes beautiful, but the real kind where someone learns their worth isn't determined by others' opinions. Hope found the manuscript one day and read it in one sitting, tears streaming down her face. "Mama, this needs to be published." "It's just for family," Clara protested. "No," Hope said firmly. "This is for every woman who thinks she's not enough. Every man who's been dismissed for his scars, every person waiting to be seen. This is the true story that my fiction tries to tell." With Clara's reluctant permission, Hope sent the manuscript to her publisher. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The Mountain Man's Bride, a true account of love and transformation, became a sensation. Letters poured in from across the country. Women trapped in loveless marriages, girls told they were too ugly or too pretty, men dismissed for their appearance or circumstances, all writing to say Clara's story had changed them. One letter stood out. It was from a young man in Boston, scarred from a factory accident, convinced no woman would ever want him. "I read your book 3 times, he wrote. "Each time I understood more. Mr. Boone's scars didn't make him less worthy of love. They were just marks on his skin. The real scars, the ones that matter, are the ones we carry inside from being told we're not enough. Thank you for showing me that those can heal." Clara wrote back to every letter, sometimes just a few lines of encouragement, sometimes pages of advice. It became her new purpose, being the voice she'd needed when she was young and alone. Charlotte became her assistant in this work, helping organize the correspondence, sometimes writing responses under Clara's guidance. The beautiful girl who'd once thought her looks were her only asset had become a woman of substance, depth, and purpose. "I'm 30 now. Charlotte said one day. The same age you were when people started calling you a spinster. Any regrets about Harrison Blackwood? Charlotte laughed. He married Felicity Grant. She's miserable. He still doesn't see her, just her face, and that face is already starting to fade, and with it his interest. She paused. I could have been her. But you're not. No, I'm myself, finally fully myself. Charlotte hesitated, then added, There's a man at the native school, Thomas Running Bear. He sees me, and I see him, despite what the town would say about a white woman and a native man. Clara smiled. The town said plenty about a spinster and a mountain man. Let them talk. Charlotte married Thomas the following spring in the same meadow where Clara had celebrated her 60th birthday with Elias. The town was scandalized. Charlotte's family disowned her, but she stood tall in her simple dress, looking at Thomas the way Clara had looked at Elias, like she was finally home. Years continued to pass. Clara watched her grandchildren grow, some beautiful in conventional ways, others not, but all confident in their worth. She watched the town slowly change, influenced by the stories spreading from the mountain stories of transformation, of seeing truly of love that transcended appearance. Even Prudence Baker in her final years transformed. She came to Clara one last time, carried up the mountain by her grandsons. I was wrong about everything, she said, her voice weak but clear. Beauty worth value. I had it all backward. You tried to tell us, but we couldn't hear it. You hear it now, Clara said gently. That's what matters. My Isabel, she learned from you, not me. She's happy in a way I never was. Her children are free in a way mine never were. Prudence grasped Clara's hand with surprising strength. Thank you for showing her what I couldn't. Prudence died that winter, but not before writing her own story, a confession of sorts about the price of valuing appearance over substance. Isabel published it after her death, adding to the growing literature of transformation coming from the mountains. On Clara's 70th birthday, 10 years after Elias's death, the family gathered again. She was frailer now, moving slowly, but her eyes were still clear, still seeing. Samuel, gray-haired now, himself raised a toast. To our mother who taught us that beauty isn't in the eye of the beholder, it's in the heart of the beheld, waiting to be recognized. Ruth, a grandmother, many times over, added, who showed us that transformation isn't about changing who you are, but about becoming who you've always been. William, still strong from mountain living, said, who proved that love sees what others miss. Hope, successful beyond her dreams, but still grounded, said, who gave us permission to be ourselves fully and without apology. Marcus Home from Diplomatic Missions concluded, who built a family where everyone belongs regardless of how they look or where they come from. Clara looked around at them all, her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, the extended family of choice that had grown around them. In that moment, she saw Elias in all of them, his way of seeing his acceptance, his love living on. That night, Charlotte helped her to bed. Charlotte was 50 now. Her beauty faded into something better, character, wisdom, strength. You changed my life, Charlotte said. When I came to your birthday party 20 years ago, I was lost. You were never lost, Clara corrected. You were just looking in the wrong mirrors. You were the right mirror. No, Clara said. I was just someone who'd learned to see clearly. Elias was my right mirror. I was yours. Now you're the mirror for others. That's how it works, each one seeing and being seen, passing it on. Clara lived another 5 years, dying peacefully in her sleep, at 75 in the cabin Elias had built, surrounded by the life they'd created together. Her funeral was larger than Elias's had been. People came from across the country, readers of her book, recipients of her letters, women and men whose lives had been changed by her story. Hope read from her mother's final manuscript found on her desk. I was not transformed by love. I was revealed by it. Elias Boone didn't make me beautiful. He saw that I already was. Not in my face, which remained scarred and plain, but in my essence, which had always been whole, just waiting for recognition. Every person who reads this has that same wholeness, that same beauty, waiting. You don't need to change. You need to be seen, and more importantly, you need to see yourself through eyes of love rather than judgment. I spent 32 years believing I was ugly, worthless, destined for loneliness. I spent 43 years knowing I was beautiful, valuable, worthy of the deepest love. The difference wasn't in my face, it was in my understanding. See yourselves, dear ones. See each other. Look past the surfaces that change and fade. Find the eternal beauty that lives in every soul brave enough to be authentic. And remember, you are not too old, too young, too plain, too anything. You are enough exactly as you are, waiting only for the right eyes to see it. Sometimes those eyes are in others. Sometimes they must be your own. But once you really see the transformation isn't from ugly to beautiful, it's from hidden to revealed, from sleeping to awake, from existing to living. As Hope finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. The legend of Clara Boone would continue, passed down through generations, but her truth was simpler than any legend. Love sees clearly, and being seen with love allows us to become who we've always been. The cabin still stands in those mountains, maintained by her descendants. Couples come there to marry women, come to find themselves. People come to understand that beauty isn't about what meets the eye, but what meets the soul. And sometimes on quiet evenings when the sun sets just right, visitors swear they can see them. Clara and Elias sitting on their porch, seeing each other still beautiful in their truth, eternal in their love, proving forever that transformation isn't about becoming someone else, but about finally, fully, fearlessly becoming yourself. The town of Cedar Ridge eventually erected a statue not of Clara as the beauty she was said to have become, but of Clara as she'd always been, standing straight and proud beside Elias, both scarred, both real, both beautiful in their authenticity. The plaque reads simply, "They saw truly." And in the end, that's all any of us can hope for, to see and be seen truly, completely, with love that transforms not our faces, but our understanding of what beauty really is. Clara Wade Boone proved that such seeing is possible, such love is real, and such transformation is available to anyone brave enough to stop looking in the world's mirrors and start looking through love's eyes instead. Her story ended where it began, with a woman considered ugly by the world's standards. But unlike her beginning, her ending knew the truth: she had always been beautiful. It just took the right eyes to see it, and once seen, that beauty became undeniable, unchangeable, eternal. The mountain man had taken an ugly wife the town had mocked, but he'd known what they couldn't see, that beauty isn't in the face, but in the soul, and Clara Wade's soul had always been radiant. He just gave her the mirror to see it herself. And in seeing it, she helped countless others see their own hidden radiance, proving that we're all beautiful when seen through eyes of love. We're all worthy when valued for our wholeness. We're all transformed when we finally stop trying to be what others expect and become who we truly are. That was Clara's legacy. Not that she became beautiful, but that she always was. And so are we all, waiting only for the courage to see and be seen truly, completely, with the transformative power of authentic love.